Thank you. My apologies for us getting started late. The board just came from closed session. In closed session, the board approved by a vote of 3-2 with Baton, Caswell, and Collins dissenting to approve a settlement agreement to resolve a special education claim against the district. The settlement involves funding a non-public school placement with related costs for 2 school years with releases and waivers of claims. Also, in closed session, this evening, Dr. McGee submitted his resignation to the Board of Education effective the 29th of September. The board voted unanimously to accept his resignation and approved a separation agreement. Dr. McGee shared with us that he will gladly provide whatever support the board and interim leadership need to assure a smooth transition. Let me read to you his letter to the board. Dear members of the Board of Education, for a host of personal reasons, I am offering my resignation effective at the close of business on Friday, September 29th. I appreciate the opportunity you and earlier boards have extended me to lead and serve this phenomenal school district. Blessed with supportive community, a dedicated Board of Education, an extraordinarily capable and caring staff, and above all, a student body that exemplifies excellence in character and achievement, I leave Palo Alto knowing the district will continue to thrive, and I stand ready to provide whatever support the board, interim superintendent, and/or next superintendent may need during this transition of leadership. I am confident that you will choose wisely and well, knowing that our students, staff, and community need and deserve the very best leader who will sustain all that is good, heal what is hurt, and strengthen this outstanding school district. Thank you again for trusting me to lead this district, as well for your unwavering commitment to all students and for your long hours of thoughtful work. Most sincerely, Glenn William Max McGee. We thank Dr. McGee for his years of hard work and for his many contributions to our district. His optimism, vision, and vibrancy, along with the innovative programs and practices he brought to our district, will be his lasting legacy. Work on an interim leadership plan will start immediately, and as we will discuss later this evening, we will be issuing an RFP for a firm to assist in the search process for our next superintendent. I will be the spokesperson for any questions on this issue, so if you have questions, please direct them to me, and we stand ready to continue our work. Thank you, Dr. McGee.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to jump into our work. The agenda is in front of you, colleagues. I'd like to get a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Mr. Dauber, seconded by Ms. DiBrienza. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. Okay, great. First order of business will be our superintendent's report.
Great. I have a brief one tonight, and I first wanted to recognize both PAS and the Partners for Student Success and the CAC, the Citizens Advisory Committee for Special Education, for their wonderful Sunday events. These were on consecutive weekends, September 10th and 17th. And appreciate the board president scooping up ice cream for the PAS group, and other board members were able to attend and talk to our members of our historically underrepresented community about how important our work is and what we need to do and our plans for going ahead. And I know that good work will continue because we have extraordinary commitment and exceptional talent working on these important issues of equity, access, and opportunity. Likewise, the CAC picnic was such a different event than it was 3 years ago. I took my notebook ready to write down complaints and have a line, and I only had one issue to look into after 2.5 hours of ice cream and pizza and balloon making. And again, I appreciate the board members who came out on a Sunday afternoon and our leadership, Kimberly Lee and Christina Schmidt and the others who put that event together. It was just wonderful to see that networking. And for the PAS, I was remiss in not mentioning Kim Bomer and Sarah Woodham Johnson for all their extraordinary work with PAS. Very quickly, elementary math night was last night. We had 120 people fill this room and the whole boardroom. And the Ms. Harris, our Chief Academic Officer, launched the evening, and we had our TOSAs having hands-on lessons and gave about 120 parents an immersive experience in elementary mathematics, and which did not look like arithmetic of old. And it was really terrific to see the mathematical thinking of all ages last evening. And we hope to post some pictures on our website of that. Hey, some other good news. Chem H was approved on September 16th with an honors designation. Look at these young kids in front. So if you have taken Chem H, you get the weighted grade point for it. So, and I want to recognize Ms. Ophik and Ms. Lawrence, who really drove that process. And obviously it was quite well done because we didn't even have to resubmit. It was approved on the first shot. And then finally, the renaming committee, we notified the committee and scheduled the first meeting, October 16th. Ms. Ophik and Mr. Wheeler will be staffing that committee, and look forward to their work, and probably have to readjust the time frame, but they'll talk about that at that first meeting. We are a bit behind. So with that, I conclude my report for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. Let's start with Mr. Eastless.
Good evening. I've got 5 things tonight. Well, 2 weeks ago we had Quadcella and Club Day, and we had a great turnout. We had almost the whole quad filled with students hearing their peers perform. Club Day was a great turnout. Number 2, upcoming is Spear Week, finally, right? 25 days till Spear Week. And ASB is asking the parents if they would like to volunteer to email Mr. Hall. ASB also started selling shirts for Spirit Week, and to buy a shirt, you could go to the web store or ASB Bookkeeper. Number 3, the Wellness Committee applications are due on the 29th on Friday. You would basically work with the Wellness Center and speak about social justice problems around campus. Suicide Prevention Month is this month, and we are having our last event on Friday. There is, the theme is a healthy way to handle stress. There will be therapy dogs, a gun hat, and stress balls, therapy, art therapy, music, yoga, volleyball, and the juggling club will be out there. Number 4 is Flex. The Flex update is within the next 2 weeks, Flex will be flexible again. You will be able to go around to any teacher with the pass, and those teachers will sign off. We thank the administration for hearing out the students. Number 5, if you have not heard, there's a petition going around to all the seniors. We currently have 195 signatures, and the petition is about, instead of all green gowns, make them from green to white once again. Oh, Mr. McGee, we are sad to hear that you are going. And God bless you, and thank you for all the things you did for this community and this district.
Thanks, Richie. We had a great session on Friday, too, didn't we? Spent an hour and 15 minutes with the ASB, and I got a lot of ideas to share after that meeting.
Mr. Eastless, Mr. Ruth.
Thanks so much, Richie. So I'd gone 2 Fridays ago, we had our fall club fair. It was a really big success, lots of cool clubs, and it's always fun seeing how it's put on. And this year, because we didn't have the usual senior quad because of all the construction, we moved it to our freshman quad, the green quad, and it worked out really well. It worked out really successfully, no real disruptions. We've been planning for homecoming for a while now. Shirt sales are closing up, and we recently opened up homecoming court nominations. That'll be interesting seeing all the seniors nominated. I'm looking forward to that. Our homecoming theme is around the town, and we're already working on the games and decorating and all of that. It's going to be a really great week. We're really hyping it up, despite all the construction that might be changing our plans. This Friday, we have an event called Movie Medley. Every September, we have what's called the Gun Olympics, and this year, we're doing sort of an obstacle course with different movie themes, like a web from Spider-Man and other themes like that. And last year, we had Maze Runner, and this year, it's Movie Medley with a bunch of different obstacles. And that'll be really fun to see that happen at lunch, and I'm excited for the event. I'd also like to draw attention to California Senate Bill 468 that was signed just yesterday by Governor Brown, called the Student Voice Bill for pretty good reason. It codifies some of the best practices of school districts statewide, and it was just signed into law. So I want to thank you guys for already following some of those best practices, including allowing student board members, giving a preferential vote, etc. So thanks for the proactive contribution to student voice, and hoping, and here's to everything. Here's to hoping that we can, advance that even further in the coming days, months, weeks, years. Yeah. So last but not least, in regards to the resignation of Dr. McGee, at least to the board, I think it's absolutely essential that we have no loss in our momentum towards board goals and all of that. I know, at least with transitions of leadership, it can be hard to, get things done, but I want to make sure that all of us are committed as much as we can be to making sure our board goals are still followed despite changes in leadership. Personally, while it saddens me that Dr. McGee is leaving, and I think it saddens a lot of the gun community as well, myself, and I think I also speak for all of gun, we wish you the best of luck going forward. You've made a real impact on us and our schools, and we hope our next superintendent, both interim and the one we hire for next year, will be as visionary and as qualified. So yeah, thank you, Dr. McGee, and that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Ruin. Okay, up next is our consent calendar. These items are considered routine and will be approved in one action without discussion. If a board member requests an item to be removed from the calendar or a citizen wishes to speak to an item, it will be considered under action items. Colleagues, anybody want to take anything off this, or can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move we approve the consent calendar as presented.
I second.
Moved by Ms. Baton-Caswell and seconded by Ms. DeBrienza. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, next up we have open forum. This is the part of our agenda where the community has the opportunity to comment on things that are not agendized for the evening. As you may know, as the agenda items come up, if you want to speak to those, we do make time at the beginning of each of those agendized items to do that. This is called open forum for anything that's not on the agenda. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have a handful of cards here. You'll have 3 minutes. If you need a translator, I believe we have an English-Spanish translator in the house. Do we have an English-Spanish translator in the house? We don't.
Richie's like,
Richie might be able to
Richie
help
might
us.
be able to do it in a pinch. So if you need a translator, please let us know. You'll have twice the amount of time. I'm going to call your name in sets of 3 so that you can make your way to the lectern to kind of move us along. Mr. Dauber will time you. He'll push go when you say your name, and then you'll see an amber light when you have a minute left. All right, Carrie Wagner, Keith Farrell, Vicki Huang.
Hi, I'm Carrie Wagner, longtime Palo Alto U.S. parent and a gun parent. Max, thank you for your service. And you always take the high road. To the board, I hope you have a plan. The emails calling for Kathy Lawrence and Kim DiOrio to be fired are already coming. They're in your inbox now. What are you going to do? You're going to be inundated by people who won't show their faces or sign their names publicly, because it works. It works to sway your opinion. Clearly, this is how we treat superintendents, at least this one and the previous 2 that I'm aware of. We'll have an interim superintendent, no Title IX coordinator. So tell us your plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. Keith Farrell, Vicki Huang, Loris Johnson.
All right, ready? All right, good to go. Keith Farrell. A few years ago, we were promised transparency. And since then, we've received anything but, from the district office down to the assistant principals. PAUSD has consistently and consciously not reported issues so that they do not become publicly available. In some cases, information was never communicated to the district office but stayed at the site. This lack of documentation is specifically against board policies. According to the Cozen report, this is how the administration is trained and is communicated in principal and cabinet meetings. Do we really have administrators who don't see this as a problem? If so, we need to replace them. Anyone involved in this training needs to be fired. We continually hear how the administration is solely concerned for the students. How does this practice of silence benefit the students? Who does it actually benefit? It benefits the administrators' jobs and the district's reputation. So student health and well-being is no higher than third on the list of priorities. The one person who did document their notes, Jonathan Fraseri, has now moved on to Lydian. Diorio informed Wade and McGee of the October 2016 incident, and there was no other mention of her in the report. Did she really just check out, or was the remainder of her communications done without documentation as she has trained her staff? If she did not document in order to save her job or reputation, she should be fired as well. If she checked out, how can she say she's concerned about the students' well-being? Vicki Kim asked Wade multiple times if they should offer a UCP. Is Vicki Kim unable to offer that to the family? Why didn't she even mention it to the family? Again, the culture of silence. We already know that only about 20% of victims ever report. So if there are 5 assaults a year, the administration only has to sweep 1 under the rug. Sounds like they're doing a pretty good job of that. If anything does go wrong, luckily there's no documentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Vicki Huang, Lars Johnson, Catherine Jordan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vicki Huang. I have been a PAUSD parent for 13 years. First, I want to admire Dr. McGee's courage to admit mistakes and take responsibility. The resign, even though it's disappointment to a lot of people, I think it showed the integrity of who you are. And thank you for that. I hope other people who involved in this or the mistakes who can also show their integrity and follow by their actions. Okay, then I have some comments about last Thursday's meeting. Last Thursday, I attended a public hearing meeting of the Cozen report. First, the meeting was held at 4 to 6 p.m. when most people are still at work, except for teachers and school admins. So I think a lot of people missed the event because of that. So I recommend that all public meetings should be held at a time that the public can attend. Okay. Secondly, during the open forum in that meeting, when one teacher called the supporters to stand up, I was very surprised to see that the board didn't stop him nor comment anything afterwards. If we were told that applauses after a comment is disrespectful to audience with different opinions, isn't this call to stand action even more offensive? Sitting over there, I suddenly could imagine what those sexual harassment victims felt when they went to school every day. Okay. I hope the board can be more impartial. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huang. Lars Johnson, Catherine Jordan, Sarah Woodham.
Good evening, board members. Superintendent McGee, my name is Lars Johnson. I'm a PAUSD parent, community member, tax-paying community member. So I too would like to thank the superintendent for his services, for his vision, and regret his sudden departure. Despite the issues we had, I share the sentiments of the previous 2 speakers in expressing my hope that the board has a plan, and my hope that the buck doesn't stop with the resignation of the superintendent. I would like to go back and wonder about what may have led Dr. McGee many personal reasons to tender his resignation, and if they were in any way related perhaps to recent letters published in the Palo Alto Weekly by some of our board members. And some of the comments were, for example, the buck does stop with the board, said board member Jennifer DiBrianza. I think there are a lot of places that the buck stops along the way, but our job is oversight of the district, and this is something that is going to have a big impact. Another quote from another board member: "We have to do better as board members," board member Todd Collins told his colleagues. To the community, he said, "In this particular case, we have failed you." So I hope that as a superintendent is taking responsibility for his lack of leadership in certain aspects, you will consider in this reset to do the same as our board members, because you are our trustees. And trust is the firm belief in the reliability of someone. And the community has to wonder if we can rely on all of you with the missions you have laid out for yourself serving on this board. In particular, if I summarize the trust placed in you in a single sentence for every board member, President Godfrey, we rely on you to put student interests first from your own campaign. Thank you. Trustee Dauber, we rely on you for social emotional issues to promote those. Thank you very much. Ms. Baton-Caswell, we rely on you for community leadership. Ms. DiBrianza, we rely on you for the educator's perspective on this board that has been sorely missing. And Mr. Collins, according to your own campaign statements, we can rely on you for strong financial management and oversight. So with what the trust we place in you, given you specific areas of expertise based on your campaign statements, as we are now resetting the district and relooking at our leadership and knowing where the buck stops, I do hope there will be a moment of reflection. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Catherine Jordan, Sarah Woodham, Mary Vincent.
Thank you. For me, this issue is about student safety and the law. I have a few different voices here tonight. For now, this is coming from the mother of the church victim. I'm the mother of the church victim, the mother who met with PAUSD in March 2017 to ensure that an investigation had been opened per the January 31, 2017 court notification of the Pauley student's felony conviction. I shared with you previously that it had not. Is the board aware that my daughter educated the other family about their rights via Title IX? Is the board aware that one of the reasons the unnamed student received a felony conviction is that there was a taped confession done by the police? Unfortunately, it doesn't take but once for a perpetrator to wise up to being recorded. It's my belief that the October 2016 campus assault was no less serious than the church assault, simply that the assailant had learned how to protect himself. If the district were to have considered this possibility, which they didn't do because they didn't bother to investigate according to the Cozen report, they would have realized that in order to ensure student safety, the investigation needed to go deeper than the cursory look they gave it. The important question, this is my voice now, is why Kim DiOrio or Max McGee, why didn't they take steps to keep our Pauley students safe? Why was a sexual predator allowed to continue to attend classes at Pauley? Pauley Principal Kim DiOrio and Superintendent Max McGee were required, under state law, Ed Code 48915C, to determine whether the October 11, 2016 perpetrator committed or attempted sexual assault in the October 2016 incident in a Pauley bathroom. According to the Cozen draft report, they did not. At this point, since Dr. McGee is resigning, how can Ms. DiOrio remain in a position of trust over our children if she won't take steps to keep them safe? I'm glad to see the OCR letter of findings on the agenda tonight. Thank you. I hope that reviewing this letter of findings coupled with the Cozen draft report will give the board perspective on the endemic and systemic problems of noncompliance with anti-discrimination laws and some shame and impetus to do something about it. It should also give some perspective about the actions of some of the players then and the actions of some of the players now. Kim DiOrio specifically called out in the OCR letter of findings for her failure to report 25 sexual misconduct allegations against Phil Winston, some of which came from students over the course of 3 years. What about the ongoing harm to students that occurred during her failure to come forward? One parent wrote in to then Superintendent Kevin Skelly about the inappropriate touching she witnessed Phil Winston doing to students during lunch in the quad. Would that have occurred had she come forward with the allegations when she was bound to do so? After hearing one of our board members quote after the wrap-up of the Cozen presentation that we are happy to have had this presentation report so we can now move on, I hope that I'm taking it out of context. Apologize in advance if so. To me, it summed up the cultural problems existing not only within the district, but possibly the school board, all of us, to think that we would just move on from this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Sarah Woodham, Mary Vincent, Meb Steiner.
Hello, I'm Sarah Woodham, 3 kids, Aloni, Jordan, Polly. In short, I do just want to thank Max for his commitment and service to the district. I too am surprised by this resignation. And, I can say that over his tenure, the bar has been raised in terms of expectations, classroom practices, and hires that we've had of late in our district. To be clear, I don't want to minimize the responsibility he and others bear. I include the board and everyone else for, some of these gross financial miscalculations and the Title IX violations. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. With that said, I also want to convey this perspective. So for my 10 years in the school district, 3 different elementary schools for 3 kids, Jordan and Polly, I've had 10 principals. As I and others have advocated for students and families who have had relatively little voice over the years, just historically, the storyline looks something like this. Achievement at the highest level just could not be expected for certain demographics of kids. And that's 1. 2, what you gonna do? The achievement gap, it's a national problem. And 3, things here in Palo Alto, it's Palo Alto, it's, largely, things are just awesome. And frankly, there was very little data analysis to counter that narrative. Over time, and particularly during the tenure of Dr. McGee, at the site level, there have been a level of attentiveness and steps taken to ensure consistent and successful experiences and outcomes for all of our kids, certainly for a much broader range of our kids. This is a primary job of a public school system, because from where I sit, no matter what happens and however many, turnovers and change that we have, there is a slice, maybe a large slice of our public, of our families that will do fine regardless because they have the resources. As a public school system, you really need to serve those who have no other choice. So credit to Dr. McGee for tangible progress in several areas. This includes, to me, addressing, taking on mental health issues, and wellness, changes to block scheduling, test stacking, being able to, our ability now to file equity complaints, ferreting out achievement and opportunity gap factors in the work of the MATD committee, the review of special ed programs. Now we have more experienced counseling resources. We have more parity in the guidance model between high schools. And frankly, we have new hires, from what I can see, that raise the bar in our schools and our classrooms.
Thank
For
you, Ms.
that,
Whittle.
thank you.
Thank you. Mary Vincent, Meb Steiner, Terry Baldwin.
I need to press a button.
No,
Just say your name and
It
he'll.
says press button. Okay. Maybe we get rid of that sign. Okay, I just wanted to say a few things to add to the comments that have already been said and not to be repetitious. But I will add on to Sarah's comments about the genuine attention to the students that have historically been underrepresented through the Achievement Gap, the Minority Achievement and Talent Development Committee. I felt that I've been working in that effort since 2006, and I felt that Dr. McGee was really the first person to take a genuine interest in those students and understanding what's holding them back and understanding how they could succeed with, or they could have more success in PAUSD. In terms of special ed and the CAC and families of children with special needs, it was again, I'm on a committee that I've been on, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And it was the first time that we had a superintendent who wanted to hear our families' stories, who also required his staff in special ed to hear the family stories, not to hold the families at bay, which had been the policy of some in the past. So I hope that that continues. It's also the first time that I'd seen definitely seen a superintendent reach out to Stanford and invite them to come and share their data on the achievement of historically underrepresented students. This is data that Stanford had had for years and that had been actually presented to our former superintendent and went nowhere. Basically was buried. So, I do appreciate the improvement in counseling. The ACS counselors are really interns. They don't have years and years of experience that you may need to provide mental health services to adolescents in high school. And my son was actually under the guidance of somebody from Cassie, who's our current provider, and I felt that service was much better than the service had been up to that point. The person kept in touch with me. There was a closed loop. There was feedback. So I appreciate the switch to Cassie, even though it costs the district money. I think it's money well spent. And the block scheduling, I appreciate Dr. McGee's support of Dr. Herman in terms of encouraging and requiring her teachers to post assignments to Schoology, a system that we all agree is a good system and we've paid millions of dollars for. And also for the block scheduling, which is so revolutionary that I had it when I was in high school. My request is to make sure that in the next 8 or 9 months that we don't see a rudderless ship and that you
Thank you,
make
Ms.
sure
Vincent.
that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Meb Steiner, Terry Baldwin, Kim Bomar.
Good evening. I'm Meb Steiner, member of the community tonight. To say that I am disappointed that Dr. McGee has had to tender his resignation would be an understatement. I really want to thank you for your leadership, your availability, your openness, and your collaborative approach. You have been available to all stakeholders in our district. I also want to thank you for a very gracious resignation letter, both in tone and word. A letter urging healing and the confidence of a bright future for our district. I want to add my voice to that request. I shared at the last board meeting that I have been a part of the Palo Alto Unified School District for 50 years. I started in 2nd grade when my family moved here. As a student, as a parent, as an employee, I have come across countless people in this community, and I have yet to meet someone who is not concerned for our kids, who is not concerned for our district. Every single person in 50 years, in the community, in the schools, anywhere that I have gone, the #1 priority are our kids and our district. Lately, however, I feel as if I've fallen down the rabbit hole and landed in the Queen of Hearts garden. There are calls for off with this head and off with that head and off with so-and-so's head and personal attacks. This is incredibly disheartening and demoralizing and the worst kind of role model for our kids. This is not us. This is not the district I have known. This is not the district I want us to be. And it does not help us to move forward or to address our problems together. I want to end by saying thank you to Dr. McGee for always trying to work together, for always being available to hear concerns, to reach out into the community, to be there and to listen and to try to take action. Thank you, Dr. McGee, for sharing your talents, your time, your passion, your humor. I think the lame duck will never be forgotten from Chowdown. You will be missed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meb.
Thank you, Ms. Steiner. Terry Baldwin, Kim Bomar.
Thank you. Terry Baldwin, President of the Palo Alto Educators Association. I probably won't be as eloquent as Meb there, although I echo everything she said. Dr. McGee, I just want to thank you on behalf of all of PAEA for all the hard work you've done here at PAUSD. Sorry. Excuse me. It's been clear that you care about kids, just like all the teachers here. you've supported us and these students, and I'm very disheartened to hear that you're leaving us so soon. Sorry. To the board, I really hope that you have a plan to move on in a positive way, because it hasn't been positive here. That's why I'm so emotional, because I love this district. And I've been here 18 years now, and I'm just really sad to see how it's going. So thank you, Dr. McGee, for all you've done and for being there and being open and having an open door policy. We really appreciate it. And again, sorry about the breakdown, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baldwin. Kim Bomar?
My name is Kim Bomar, co-chair of PAS and a district parent. I'm reflecting on not so many years ago when I was invited to meet with the hiring committee or the selection committee for a next superintendent. And I remember meeting with some people saying, you know, a big laundry list of what we wanted, including focus on equity and excellence for all students and supports. A few past parents were with me with our laundry list, and when that meeting was over, as we were walking out to the parking lot, I said, ladies, you realize that person we just described doesn't exist, right? But then when we met Dr. McGee, we were actually very surprised, pleasantly surprised, that with his heart for equity, with his high degree of credentials, his high expectations, his approachability, his warmth, we were actually pretty surprised that we really got what we wanted. We were pleased to also to see the first thing that Dr. Max did when he got here was to start this Minority Achievement and Talent Development Advisory Committee, which fortunately has a new name now, because he really was taking seriously this issue of how to help support and give scaffolding to students who don't necessarily have advocates and all the necessary supports in this district to do very well. It was the first thing he did, first major thing when he got here. And the fruit, that initiative is still bearing fruit in ways that the district is learning, is still working to continue and to bring through fruition. I feel that in my years in the district here, we just have not had parents who have a focus on equity and fairness for all children, just have not had a better friend in the district than you, Dr. McGee. And we're losing a huge advocate and resource, and we're going to miss you. And I just want to thank you for all of the stellar work that you've done, much of which is, you know, not highlighted. It's not in the papers. People don't know so much about it. But for those of us who do, I just sincerely thank you, and I wish you well. I also want to thank the board. In every email or letter I send, I try to thank you for the work you're doing, the late nights, the tough decisions, because I know in my heart, I know most of you well enough to know that you believe you're guiding the district in the best way that you can and in the best interests of our students. And I sincerely hope that you will follow the continue the good work and equity that needs to be done, and also paying continued attention to a lot of the shortcomings that have marked these past years, whether by failures in senior administration, lack of depth in administrative leadership, or whatever the reasons are, so that all of our children can be safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pomar. Okay, colleagues, that's it for our cards. We have a unique agenda item this evening in that we have a public hearing on certification of the availability of textbooks and instructional materials. I'm going to open that public hearing to see if we have any comments on that. Seeing no comments, I'm going to close that hearing. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the agenda item 6A, superintendent search process.
Great. Well, you are in for an exciting process, and I remember very clearly working with Leadership Associates. There's a lot of good firms out there who can support the board and find the ideal candidate for the next superintendency. But I'm going to turn this over to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Ms. Hendricks, who can speak to this.
There we go. Thank you, Dr. McGee. So I looked back to the last recruitment process in 2014, and we had started that timeline a bit later in the year. It was actually in February of 2014. And at that time, we ran a pretty quick request for proposals from firms to conduct the search. We're starting a little bit earlier this year, which gives us some good lead time. So basically what I'm looking for from the board, is any discussion you have about this process, and ultimately the directive to go ahead and issue an RFP to 3 to 5 firms who will come back, make public presentations, and one of which will be selected to conduct the search on the behalf of the district.
Okay, great. Okay, colleagues, let's see if we have any questions for Ms. Hendricks. Let's start with Ms. Baton-Caswell.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. I was here during the last process, and one of the most important things when we have consultants respond to an RFP, particularly for something like this, is that the partners that are going to actually do the search are the ones that come and present. So the written proposals don't really give us much. What gives us much is the actual presentations to the board. And if we don't have the actual partners that are going to be doing the search, we can't make an evaluation. So I think that needs to be one of our requirements.
For the RFP?
Yeah.
So, good idea. So noted, yeah.
I don't remember exactly how many actually came forward to present to us. There were at least 3, but there may have been more last time. It was very obvious to us where we had a connection and where we didn't have a connection. So
I believe that you had 3 firms come and present. Does that sound right? In public session?
yeah, I think it was Leadership, Ray and Associates, and another one. Who
You might have had
spacing.
HYA, could have been one.
Say that again?
HYA, Hazard Young Associates?
Yeah, ITEA came in, Bella
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we have to have that. Last time we had input from all of the major organized groups in the community. I want to make sure that that is a step in our process. It's really important that we understand what community needs are. There were some very clear desires in our last round. We were really looking for some certain skill sets. We were looking for someone with vision. We were looking for someone with innovation. And that isn't what was looked for the time before. So our community needs change. And I think it's important that we have that information as a board.
One of the things that we'll ask the firms to present on is how they'll go about conducting the community focus groups and input sessions to make sure that they capture input from all stakeholders within the district and community partners as well. So they'll be presenting on that to you when they come to the board.
Okay, so I don't know if that has to be designated in the RFP requirements, but if it does, then I hope it will be in there.
It's part of their standard process, but we will specify that in the RFP.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baton-Castle. Mr. Dauber.
That all makes sense, and I think it's extremely important to have community input and to have it summarized for the board and the community so that we can understand what the values are that are most important to folks. One of the features of the process in the past, at least the past couple of times, I think has been a large visit to the sort of leading candidate at the end, which Dr. McGee may have a different perspective. I just wonder how useful that is as part of the selection process. It may be that it's great as part of the sales process on why this is a great place to come. So that may be important and useful, but it does seem like it seems to me that having maybe a smaller set of people, dig deep into, or at least visit, to have conversations with folks who know the candidates best, and more than one of them may be useful for us to get some, better insight than we'll get simply from having the candidate come and speak, candidates come and speak to us. So this isn't really about the selection of the consulting firm, where I think it's Ms. Baten-Castle's point is a really important one. But as we think as a board about the process, I think we should think about how do we make sure that we get the information that we need in rich enough form early enough so that we can actually use that to make a decision. And I don't know if a ceremonial sort of visit is to one person is really all that useful in that way.
Yeah, I'd say my experience on that is that the different recruiting firms have different perspectives themselves. So I think it'll be interesting for them to share with you why they believe that's important or not. I've actually seen a couple of the larger recruiting firms go away from that type of visit. But I think either way, we'd want them to define, the pros and cons of that approach or how it could be done differently.
Great, thanks, Mr. Dauber. Mr. Collins.
Thank you. So just to clarify, what we're talking about today is just the issues of the RFP for the search firm,
That's correct.
right? And will there be opportunities to opine about the process and work out what process we want to follow?
Yes, and once we initiate the process, all of this will become public documents on our website. So we'll be posting when you're interviewing the recruiting firms, what the timeline's going to be like, when the community forums and the input sessions are going to be. They'll be downloading what is gathered during those sessions as well. So that'll all become part of our district website so that people can access the process readily.
That's very helpful. Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm sure all of us have a number of views about how the process might be run and how it might be different than in the past. I'm sure you do as well. So I look forward to sharing those at the appropriate time, but this seems fine. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ms. DiBrienza.
Thank you. My colleagues have asked all my questions. I have no more.
Thank you, Mr. Arun.
Yeah, so just to clarify, what we're talking about today is only about the RFP for the new, okay.
That's
for the
correct.
firms. Yeah, so in regards, because it's only the RFP and not the actual search process, I would concur with Ms. Baden-Caswell, I think, about having lots of community input for choosing the RFPs. I don't know what students' role has been for that in the past, but I mean, I do think students do have a stake in the new superintendent, of course, and having student input for the RFPs would be ultimately necessary for the firms. Student input for the firms would ultimately be necessary. In the records, for at least in the 2014 search or previously, has there been any active student participation in those searches of any kind?
I believe that student input was part of the focus groups during the 2014 search. And certainly for this search, the student voice is incredibly important. So that'll be a primary factor.
Thank you, yeah. Yeah, that's all for today. I think I'll be talking a whole lot more once we actually have the firms and then all of that.
Great. Looking forward to your input on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arun. Mr. Eastlas?
I have nothing to say.
Okay, great. I have no questions that my colleagues haven't already asked. I see we have this listed as action or discussion. This is,
I'm asking for directive to go ahead and initiate the RFP, and I'd like to suggest that we open it up for 2 weeks with a week for people to reply. So it would be about a 3-week process. If we open it up by September 29th, the end of the week, probably closing the process by approximately October 20th would be a timeline I'd suggest.
So you want us to waive the 2-meeting rule? Is that what you're asking?
I think we can open up the RFP. You can direct me to open up the RFP, and I can bring it back for further conversation.
okay, do you want to make a motion?
I move we waive the 2-meeting rule so that we can give direction to the associate superintendent.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Baten-Caswell and seconded by Ms. DiBrienza. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All righty, now can we get a motion to direct our Assistant Superintendent of HR to issue this RFP?
I move that we give the associate superintendent of HR the authority to put out the RFP.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Baten-Caswell and seconded by Ms. DiBrienza. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you.
Hendricks. All right, up next, authorization to accept a donation.
Right. Oh, good. This is an exciting development when for the long-awaited outdoor stage, AKA the senior deck at Pally. The Board Administrative Regulation 3290 states that the School principals can approve and accept gifts up to $25,000. The superintendent or designee can approve and accept gifts up to $50,000. Gifts in excess of $50,000 need approval and acceptance by the board. So we are bringing this item tonight seeking board approval. This policy had been sent back to the BRC and BPRC. It has not since come forward to the board for approval, but I just wanted to say that language that had been inserted, I'll just read it, though it has been approved. Gifts in excess of $50,000 and inserted were the words, or that may have a significant effect on future expenditures or directions of the district, need approval and acceptance by the board. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Ellis and Ms. Mack in a moment, but I just wanted to thank the Benatar Family Foundation. They're making this contribution to honor their daughter, Emily, who graduated in 2011. The structure is being designed by Emily's friend and former Pali High School student, Gracie Kane, and the design was approved by the school and the maintenance department, and you have attachment A in your packet. So I know this has been long awaited, and we deeply appreciate it, and beyond just routine maintenance, can't imagine that this will lead to any kind of excessive cost in the future. Mr. Ellis, Ms. Mack, would you like to take this over, please?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
But we're happy to answer any questions.
Well, from a maintenance perspective, the facility condition of the senior deck is certainly one that needs to be repaired and maintained on a continuous basis. So I'm more than overjoyed with this donation. I think it is a win-win for both the foundation and also for the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, let's see if we have any questions or comment. Let's start with you, Mr. Dauber.
I certainly appreciate the contribution. I think the district is honored to receive this offer. At least I feel that way. And I don't see any reason not to waive the 2-meeting rule for this one as well. So once we get to the end, I'll make a motion to do that.
Great, thank you. Mr. Collins.
It seems like a wonderful project, and I just can't be grateful enough to the family. And I mean, I know Lisa personally, and very appreciative of what she's done for the district over these many years. And I think this is a great gift in honor of their daughter. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ms. DiBrienza.
I have no questions, just also grateful for the donation and the opportunity to honor her at Pali.
Thank you, Ms. DiBrienza. Ms. Baton-Caswell.
I want to thank the Benatar family and their foundation because from what was a horrible tragedy, they have made investments all over the community in Emily's honor. And I think that that is a really wonderful example to set for our community, that something horrible can also have something that comes out of it that supports our community. The senior deck is not in the greatest shape. That might be an understatement. And I'm looking at a senior right now. I hope he has a few things to say about this. But, you know, if we're proud of our seniors, we should give them a place to hang out that honors them. And I think this will honor them, but it also has the opportunity to allow the seniors to do some other things and the school to do some other things with what could actually be used as an outdoor stage as well. So I will support this, and I just want the Benatar family to know how grateful we are.
Thank you, Ms. Baton-Caswell. Mr. Eastglass.
I also want to thank this family that donated this wonderful gift to Pali, to all the seniors. A few years, 2 years back, there was a group, a family standing on the senior deck at a graduation. And they started jumping up and down when their family member was graduating, and it actually broke the senior deck. So they had to come back and plywood it over. Now, let's think about that. Just plywood, imagine 200 kids on the senior deck for Spirit Week, let's say, jumping up and down. See how bad 200 kids can get hurt in that. So thank you for this wonderful gift.
Thank you. Mr. Arun.
Yeah, thanks to the foundation. As a gun student, I'm pretty jealous. That's all I got to say.
I'd like to build on what my colleagues have said and say that the new deck is designed by a former Pali student, so you know that the designer knows what happens to that deck. And so we can be assured that it's built to withstand whatever seniors can meet out. The other thing I'd like to say on a more serious note is that with Emily's passing, many things have come to pass since then, many of them financial. But I know for me personally, having in place the power of attorney over my kids' medical needs when they're adults and away from home is directly related to the Benetars family efforts in that area. And I know a lot of us have that. So
Mine too.
It's a great honor to her. And if there are any other questions, if not, Mr. Dauber, I would invite that motion.
I move that we waive the 2 meeting rule on action for this item.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Dauber and seconded by Ms. DiBrienza. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed say nay. Okay. Can I get another motion?
I move that we accept a generous contribution in the amount of $75,144 from the Emily Benetar Foundation for this project.
114.
Oh, did I say it wrong?
144.
Oh, I'm sorry, 114. Thank you.
As stated. I second.
Moved by Ms. Baton Caswell and seconded by Ms. DiBrienza. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed say nay. Okay, that passes. Thank you, Benefar family. Okay, let's move on to approval of Board Policy 5116.2. We have one card on this, so let's hear the staff presentation, and then we'll take the one card on this, and then we'll do colleague comments.
Great. Well, thank you, Comey, for coming and helping to shepherd this through. This policy was brought and approved at the BPRC meeting in August 31st of this year. Changes were made because CSBA introduced a new policy with the same number, but with a different topic, and hence the A at the end. So we are bringing this to the board for approval tonight, and we did have one board member send a note out, it was either late yesterday or today, suggesting that the first line of the proposed policy be changed to delete the text that says desires to enroll students in the school of their choice. The rationale being that since we do not enroll students in schools of their choice, instead our policy is neighborhood schools with lottery-based choice programs. So I thought that was a wise catch and that we should make it. But beyond that, I don't know if Ms. Vishakan or anybody, Ms. Mack, if you have anything you'd like to add to this policy.
No? Okay, great. Let's take our one card. Vicki Huang.
Hi, it's me again. Okay. Regarding the involuntary student transfers, many in the community have a question, even after the Cozen report. Why was the student who convicted a sexual assault crime still allowed to attend Poly? Many believe it is because he was an athlete superstar. There seems to have a thinking or a thought among some people in the community that if someone is so good at something, he or she, his or her mistakes should be ignored. Yes, Ms. Diorio might be the best principal that Poly has in the past 10 years. But does it justify that she can violate the law without accountability? I wonder if it's under the same mentality. The Poly coaches and school admins did not take action on the student athlete, perhaps because he is the best player the Poly has in the past 10 years. There are a lot of people, good people in the community, who all contribute here and there, a lot of things. We all want to do good things. But when good people make mistakes, they still harm, they still hurt. When considering involuntary student transfers, the school, the district, and the board, please remember, you are responsible for the safety of all students. And you should provide a non-discriminating learning environment for all students. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, let's get our questions on the table. Let's start with you, Mr. Collins.
No questions.
Thank you. Ms. DeBrienza.
I saw this at BPRC. I like the amendment that was made by another board member. I have no other questions.
Thank you. Ms. Baton-Caswell.
My only suggestion was the change to the first sentence, and that's being done, so I'm ready to support this.
Thank you. Mr. Dauber.
I don't have any questions, but I assume that what we'll need to do when somebody moves this is to move the adoption of this with the deletion of that clause, right? Yeah, okay.
Mr. Rudd.
Yeah, no questions on this one.
Mr. Eastlas.
No questions or comments.
Alrighty. Can I get a motion?
I move that we adopt the proposed,
Oh, wait, do we have to waive the two-meeting rule first?
oh yeah, I'm sorry. I move that we waive the two-meeting rule.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. I heard those are ayes over there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I was looking the wrong way. Okay, that was moved by Mr. Dauber, seconded by Ms. Baton-Caswell. Alrighty.
And I move that we approve the proposed BP 5116.2A with the exception of the deletion of from the word desires in the first sentence under student transfers through the word but, also in the first sentence of the student transfer section.
I will second that.
Moved by Mr. Dauber and seconded by Ms. Baton-Caswell. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. Okay, great, thank you. Let's talk budget next. Ms. Mack.
Ahead of schedule.
Good.
This budget update was presented to the board at the last meeting. Since then, there have been some changes to the budgets. The presentation this evening will focus on the changes from the presentation at the last meeting. So the first area is with the proposed budget revisions to the 17-18 budget year. On the revenue side, the ongoing revenues, we have three changes: increase of property taxes, 4.3 million, partial tax income decrease of 90,000, local revenue from special ed services increase of 200,000. This year, we're also receiving one-time state discretionary grant in the amount of 1.7 million. So these are the same proposed changes from the last meeting. On the expenditure side, we have some changes from the last presentation. Included in our proposed budget changes, we have included a 3% on-salary schedule increase to PAEA, CSCA, as well as the confidential supervisory group. The confidential supervisory group is in addition to the last presentation. In terms of positions, we are proposing to restore the 2 part-time volunteer coordinators. We've added 2 teaching positions at the elementary level. This is a change from the last meeting, the 2 teaching positions at the elementary schools. Also included a new Title IX coordinator, a special ed coordinator, and a custodian at Pally. The next bullet is new in this report. is we have stopped the hiring process for the communications coordinator position. And I want to note, because of our budget situation, we will continue, we meaning cabinet, will continue to review any vacancies that come up during this school year to determine if we can capture some savings. On the one-time expenditure side, we have included in this report off-schedule, 2% off-schedule payments to PAEA, CSCA, and the confidential supervisor group. So this is a change from the last report, from 1% to 2%. And then we've also included the increase of the transfer to the basic aid reserve. So with these changes, our budget deficit for the current year has increased to 3.8 million. And we propose to use the new school fund to fund the gap this year, as these are one-time expenditures. The off-schedule payments to our units are one-time expenditures. Also, at the last meeting, the board asked us to come back with different proposals to spend down the new schools funds. So I have proposed 2 options. Option 1 is to use the fund to pay for the 6 teachers that the board approved in June, and also pay for up to 2% off-schedule payment for PAEA, CSCA, and the confidential supervisor group. So that's about 3 million there. And I've broken out the 1% because the 1% is in the contract, and the other 1% is to be determined by the county report in May. And then the remaining balance in the fund would be spent over the next 2 years of roughly about 1.1 million. So that's option 1. Option 2 is we only pay for 1% of the off-schedule payment from this fund this year. The other 1%, so the main thinking behind this option is we will be talking to PAEA regarding the off-schedule payment. So it's possible that off-schedule payments could be less than the 2% that option 1 assumes. So our thinking is we'll pay 1% from the new school funds, so which will leave more money for the next 2 years. And if we need to pay more than 1%, then we pay it out of the fund balance in the state discretionary grant. Currently, we have about 8 million in that fund. So those are the 2 options that I propose. So based on these 2 options, I have revised the different budget scenarios. I have provided 3 budget scenarios based on how we're going to spend down the new schools fund. So for budget scenario 1, we use pretty conservative property tax growth projection, 4% growth next year, 3% growth the year after. And in this budget scenario, we adopt the option 1 of spending down the new school fund, which means using 3.8 million this year and then 1.1 million next year and 1.1 million the year after. So with these assumptions, this scenario projects budget shortfalls of 1.1 million next year and 1.4 million in 1920. Budget scenario 2 assumes the same property tax growth rates, but instead we'll use 2.3 million from the new school fund this year and then 1.9 million the year over the next each year over the next 2 years. And so this model sort of spreads out the use of the new school fund more evenly this year and the next 2 years. And with this scenario, if we need to pay more than 1% off schedule, then we'll use the state discretionary grants fund to pay any additional amounts. So based on these assumptions, this budget scenario projects budget shortfalls of $345,000 next year, and then $1.4 million in 1920, and then a small deficit in 2021. The third scenario is basically using the same assumptions in scenario 1, but up the property tax growth by 1% next year and also in 1920. So with these slightly higher property tax revenue assumptions, we don't have any budget shortfalls projected under these assumptions. So we would like the board to talk about how we should spend down the new school fund, and also these assumptions in these budget scenarios, so we have some sense moving into first interim what kind of budget assumptions that we should use for developing next year's budget. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Okay, colleagues, we do not have any cards on this. Do we want to do a 5-minute round on these questions? Assuming we have some questions? 3-minute round? You kind of have the power of the pen there. Sure. Okay, let's do it. Let's start with Ms. DiBrianza.
Okay, thanks. 3 minutes. I have to prioritize. Thank you. So I think I've said this before, I'm not a big fan of the very conservative estimate, and I understand that some of us have been burned in estimates before, but I think that if it's not actually what we think it's going to come in at, we are having conversations that we don't need to have, and we're just, I don't think it's a good use of our time. I think we will obviously pay attention to it as the year goes on, and I would like to see us use a more moderate approach. That being said, even if I was more of a supporter of scenario 3 because it seems more moderate, I believe this doesn't allow for many additions that I'm sure are going to come up. We cut some things last year that I would like to see come back. We constantly have things coming up that seem like good ways to spend our money. And the issue of our how many FTEs we have, our class sizes, our ranges, the formula we use, I think is far from being settled. And I think that we have to do a lot more work on that. And I suspect as we do that work, we're going to have to put some more money towards those classes and those FTEs. So I am supportive of the scenario 3 numbers, yet I don't think that the no budget shortfalls are projected aligns with that, because we are going to see a need to put more money into particular things. So that's sort of my initial thought. I have a question about the state discretionary grant funds that you are suggesting perhaps using our 1% from. You mentioned these, and you said that it was a fund that is earmarked for textbook adoption. Are we allowed to use that for anything other than textbook adoption?
Yes, these are truly discretionary, at the district's discretionary.
So we decided to set it aside for textbook adoption?
But we do know we have textbook adoptions coming up.
Mm-hmm. So glad to know that we're using it properly. How much do you anticipate in the next few years we're going to be needing for budget adoptions?
So these are very rough ballpark figures because we don't even know, we don't even have the list to look at. So we're guesstimating about $4 million that we'll need over the next 3 years or so.
So we have social studies and history, for example, coming up. But we asked the chief academic officers that question, so they gave us our best estimates at what they know on the curriculum adoptions coming forward.
Okay, I know. I'm, having just adopted our new elementary and middle school math curriculum, I know we have our professional development fund, which is wonderful, but I also know that it takes a lot to implement them effectively, not just adopt the textbooks, but implementation. So
So the budget would include the materials as well as training. Right.
I'd like to see some TOSAs come back, if that made sense, with that fund, if appropriate. So that's it for now. Come back.
Thank you, Ms. DiBrienza. Ms. Baton-Caswell.
Well, you answered my first question, which was, do we have any limitations on the discretionary fund allocation? And once Governor Brown, I guess, signs the legislation that will allow us to stop putting things into designated accounts, or where we don't no longer have to do that, and our reserve is still protected, I think we probably should have a conversation at that point, but it hasn't been signed yet, so until it's signed, we probably leave it like this. So that makes scenario 1 and scenario 2 not very different to me. So it's really, from my perspective, is do we budget conservatively or do we budget more moderately? And I know that we've been hit by cyclical economic cycles before, and we've been in an upcycle for a while. So I would prefer to have a more conservative projection. And that way, if we have more money, then we can make use of it. But we're not going to a situation if we hit a down cycle where we have to start cutting. So that would be my preference. And I think this is something we check in on every year. So, if it looks like things are going to be rosy next year, we can see out about 18 months. That's sort of when our vision on the cycle. Then we can make adjustments then. That would be my preference. I do think, based on tonight's news, that we need to anticipate some costs for interim leadership for the rest of the school year. And we don't have that budgeted in here, so we probably need to figure out what we need to put in there. And I don't want to do it on the fly, because I think we're probably going to be wrong. So, but I think we do need to note that in here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dauber.
When we talked about the budget last time, I recall that there was a motion to increase the budgeted amount for the off-schedule increase from 1% to 2%, but my memory was that motion failed. Am I misremembering? I didn't have a chance to go back and check the tape, and we don't yet have the minutes for that meeting. I recall. Do you? I made the motion, it failed to get a second. That's what I thought. So, so why does this include that increase?
I thought the motion was to do the 2%. I have to go back and check my notes.
Yeah, my memory is that the motion failed. So if you could do that, I appreciate that. I wanted to note, there's a line, the district will continue the discussion on compensation with the management group. So the management group is not a bargaining unit, is that right? So we're talking about meeting and conferring, is that right?
That's correct. It's a meet and confer process.
So recalling us to our discussion about the Me Too raises and all that from a year ago, we decided but have not yet pursued the question of how to redesign compensation for management in order to perhaps better align incentives with performance and so forth. So I wouldn't expect that we would reach a decision to provide a blanket increase. In fact, I think one of the reasons we haven't had that discussion yet is we didn't anticipate any increase for this year based on the fact that we didn't anticipate an increase for any of the staff members, right? So I would say that the discussion from my own perspective, the discussion to be having is about how to make those changes in the compensation system. I think discussing with management as a group about some number is really unlikely to be realistic. That's my my feedback. I don't know if others might share that or not. And I think finally, on the question of scenarios, I think it's useful, but I think an idea that maybe it was Ms. Godfrey had last time in the budgeting process is if we develop a list of priorities that will cover cases where we see an increase over what we expect so that we know what we're going to spend the money on, then the scenario, sort of getting the scenario right becomes less important because we understand what our priorities are and we can implement those in the budgeting process. So I look forward to doing that this year. I think that was a useful suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Dauber. Mr. Collins.
Thank you. First, thanks for all the hard work that I know has gone into this. I thought it was an excellent presentation. And I apologize to my colleagues and to Ms. Mack because I did have a chance to review this and I did not catch that that the motion that had failed had been actually implemented here, and I wish I had and had communicated that to Ms. Mack, so I apologize for that. I don't have a lot of comments. I prefer the more conservative approach because it's, I find, and I think Mr. Dauber's suggestion about knowing what the priorities are is a good one, and we can be flexible. We can implement a little bit on the fly. I guess I would prefer, there are options and scenarios. I guess it's scenario 2, which is kind of the level.
Option 2.
Well, also scenario 2?
Yes.
Which is the level bleed out of the new school fund.
Right.
Could you put that up on the board? Number 2, thank you.
Which is, very similar to 1, which is very similar to 1, but.
So the difference between 1 and 2 is in terms of using reserve, we'll be using, if we need to pay more than 1% off schedule, we'll use 1.5 million from the state discretionary grants fund.
Yeah. Okay.
So over 3 years, we would have used 1.5 million more from the reserve.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I just interrupt for a second? I want to apologize because I didn't myself realize the change that I'm in the 1% versus 2% until just before the meeting. Otherwise, I would have mentioned it to you. I didn't mean to surprise you with that at all. So, yeah.
Mr. Dauber, if I remember correctly, I think so what was proposed was, should we use the new school fund to pay the 2% off schedule payment? And the motion failed, I think.
Yeah, and that's not my memory, but I think we need to go. I don't know, what is this? It's for action tonight. I feel uncomfortable with that change. I don't know if we would like to reverse it.
We're not approving the scenarios.
Right, you're
tonight.
not approving the
actions.
options or scenarios.
The action's just automatic.
So your action tonight would be
All right, so this
to
isn't something
approve
that is going to affect our
the
action
proposed
tonight.
budget revisions.
Okay, that's right. That makes sense.
Right, there's 4 different actions, yeah.
Gentlemen, who would like to go first? Mr. Islas?
I have no comment.
All right, Mr. Arun.
Yeah, so thanks so much for the presentation again. I do have a few questions. So I'm not entirely aware of house turnover and market appreciation in regards to our projections, but I know last year, especially with the whole budget drama that happened then, we estimated too high, and I guess we got burned with that. So in regards to scenario 3, how reasonable exactly do you think the 5%, 4%, 3% estimation is, seeing as it's not as conservative as the other two?
Could you share what the city's projections were and how they make their projections?
Yeah,
I think that may help answer your question.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, because I'm wondering why we decide to not go conservative for scenario 3.
Yeah.
So first of all, we really don't have any data to project property tax growth beyond 1 year. So even though we're doing a 5-year projection, the property tax growth for next year, 18-19, it's based on the transactions in 2017 calendar year.
Okay.
So we can reasonably guess a range of growth rates for 18-19, because currently we have like 8 months of actual activities that we can relate to, right? So this year, so far, the housing market is behaving very similar to last year. So we can kind of expect, at least for the first 8 months, we can expect a similar growth pattern as last year. But beyond 18-19, we really don't have any data. So, but for projection, typically people would look at the big picture economic forecast and see is the economy, will the economy continue to,
Improve?
you know,
Yeah.
right, improve, or are we projecting a downturn somewhere, right? So that's why in the out years, our projections are very conservative. We use 3%. So
Right.
there is, so first of all, for the existing properties, there is usually up to a 2%
Right, the property tax.
property
Yeah.
tax
I'm aware of
growth.
how that works. I think I just don't know the numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're using that as a base and then tack on some growth from transactions. So 3% is a pretty conservative number.
That makes sense.
So as far as the city, they're in their long-range forecasting, they're using, like next year, they're using 6.5%. And over the next 5 years, their growth is anywhere between mid-5s to mid-6% increase. And their methodology is they use a 10-year rolling average. And as I mentioned last time, I would not recommend using this method for our budget.
Right.
Because our budget is more heavily dependent on property tax growth. Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just to quickly finish up, because not really 3 minutes of time. Yeah, so I agree with Mr. Dauber on the whole priorities-based budgeting. I feel like we need to know what we're going to be paying for in the next few years and, create a budget based off of that instead of scenarios. And aside from that, I think it might just be safer in general to just go with conservative estimates for budgets, only because if we get more money than we project, then hey, good for us. But if we assume we're going to get more money and we don't, I mean, that's not exactly the best idea. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents, literally. Thank you, yeah.
Oh, you sell yourself short. That's more than 2 cents. Okay, Ms. Mack, I have a few questions. Some of my questions have already been asked by my colleagues. So so we have 2 different reserves that we have an expectation that we're not going to need the whole thing at the moment. One is the New Schools Fund, which we've been working on what to do with. And then the other is what we call sort of the state fund, which as we've gotten one-time funds from the state over the last few years that we've not needed, we've not built it into our budget so that we're not in a position where we're spending that on ongoing expenses because it's one-time money. So we've earmarked that for textbooks. It looks like now we've got almost $8 million in that fund and perhaps are in the neighborhood of 4-ish to need to spend out of it. I understand that the 4-ish is rough. I understand that. Okay, so that's interesting. The reserve cap legislation, has it been signed by the governor yet?
The governor has up to until October 15 to sign.
Okay, so by October 15th, we'll know. All righty. So I will reiterate, as Mr. Dauber has said before on my behalf, that I do like to look at a budget as we go through the year of things sort of in larger chunks, so we don't like spend 50,000 here, 20,000 there, 100,000 there, but that we sort of take a pause and look at the bigger things we might want to spend on if we have the opportunity to do that. I'm not bothered by having the 2% in the P&L right now because it's going to come from a reserve one way or the other. We're either going to spend it or we're not, and it's going to come from reserve. So that doesn't make us cut things that we don't have to cut because we know where it's going to come from if we have to spend it. I'm comfortable with scenario 2 with the more conservative numbers for the moment. I I think we still have, as Ms. DeBriens has said, some squishiness on class size calculations and formula and such. And so I think the next set of dollars we may spend may be driven by a change in that formula. So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves on that. I like scenario 2 because the dollars that we need to cut in this scenario look almost reasonable to me at $300,000. Oh, that's like half of what is a day off. Well, let's make sure we talk to the teachers about a day off. Then you had in your timeline an October discussion about budget. It just, the October
December.
study session?
December.
No, your timeline shows October. Is that what you mean? Did you change it? Sorry. Let me see. Don't you normally tell us October?
Well, actually,
Yeah,
the
October budget study
yeah,
session.
That's what we had last year, so I put that on.
Okay, well, I'm just giving you a helpful piece of information.
Ms. Godfrey, you gave me a date.
The 12th.
Right.
Because we decided
December
on
12th.
September 13th when we were talking about,
December 12th?
yeah, our governance things, that we would pick the Thursday after a Tuesday, the first Tuesday meeting of the month, to be a study session. And so if you move fast, you can grab that session, October 12th, if you need it. You don't need it. All right, then we'll use it for goals. All righty, that's it for me. We have 2 cards before we do another round. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I just wanted to make one small correction. I think you said day off, but I think you meant work day, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, work day off. Okay, we have 2 cards, Robert Smith and Ken Horowitz. He's not a student, do you think? I think in adult school.
Robert Smith, Greer Road. Thank you for the opportunity to make the point I was going to make 2 weeks ago, and it fits in beautifully. The gentleman from Gunn, by the way, with his critique of scenario 3, has some very excellent points, and I'd like to kind of go in the same direction. There are a number of reasons to think that we may have problems with the property taxes going up, perhaps new things. One is we're seeing interest rates rise. That can depress either the desire to purchase or the purchase price. Under Prop 13, obviously what pushes those taxes up is a lot of people selling houses at higher prices than they previously were bought at. That's the engine behind it. The second point is I think a lot of people, older people, are holding on to their houses and renting them to avoid capital gains taxes, which are particularly disadvantageous in this community because of the prices of the houses. The third thing is the possibility that the new tax code that will be enacted sometime, I think this year, may change the tax rules for interest and for property taxes. And that could have a very deep effect on what happens to the market. So we don't know any of these things, and they're somewhat contradictory. But I think the message should be not to depend upon large taxes and charge large increases in those property taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Horowitz.
Yeah, Ken Horowitz, could you put that slide on that mentioned about Cubberley and Garland leases? I think you should eliminate that. I wasn't going to talk about Cubberley until later when you're talking about an RFP, but it's time for the board to stop kicking the can down the road regarding these leases at Cubberley. I've been following Cubberley since Foothill wanted to buy the property that the city owned, the 8 acres, and the school district has always been reluctant to sell. High schools are not going to be like they are today. They're going to be so much different. You go look at colleges today, half the learning in colleges are now online, digital learning, service learning. We're not going to need brick and mortar buildings anymore, and we're not going to need a third high school. And it's time for you to make a decision on what you're going to do with Cubberley and stop saying, we got to hold on to it, we never know what's going to happen, and make a decision on Cubberley. And just keeping it around year after year. And that's why, did you put the slide up? I don't see that slide up there. If you look at the slide, it goes into 2023, the leases. You're going to have an RFP coming up that you're going to vote on. Coverly and Garland leases are assumed to continue. And you got it going all the way to 2023. So get rid of it. You don't need it in that there. Make a decision on Coverly and Garland now and stop dragging your feet on this item. And sit down. You got 5 of you in front there and 9 on the city council. Sit down around a round table and work it out between all of you. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when you do with this RFP, because I'm going to suggest you don't spend money on a consultant. You don't have enough money to get through the year and the city needs money. Forget the consultants. You guys got elected. Do your job. Sit around a table. Make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz. Okay, do we need another round?
I just wanted to clarify one thing, and we're going to talk about it later. The cost for the consultant for Coverly,
Oh, yes, half of that.
it's half, for us, it would be half of that. That's the total cost. And I think we had some confusion in our last discussion. But Mr. Dauber and I clarified it at the City School Liaison Committee meeting, and it's half of that.
And I also want to add, in the last report, I have included the cost in the general fund, and now we have found another funding source for that. So we're not putting that in the general fund budget, but instead of, we'll fund it from the property fund, and it would be half of the cost that we reported last time, which is around $207,000.
Okay, let's go around and see if we have any more questions. Ms. DeBriens, any more questions?
The rest of mine for now were answered. Okay.
Okay, great. Ms. Baton-Caswell?
Nope, I'm good.
Mr. Dauber? Mr. Collins?
What's the property fund? And, I mean, why are we funding it? Why would you propose to fund it out of that?
This is related to, this is a capital expense that we can fund it from the property fund. So the property fund is monies that we have set aside from sales of surplus properties back in the early 80s. And we have about $4 million in that fund that we pay for one-time capital projects.
Perhaps we can talk about it offline and you can educate me. So that would be great. Thank you.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
Yeah, I just have one. So how often do we use the state discretionary grant fund?
So this is the governor's way of not committing monies on an ongoing basis. So when there's surplus money, the governor would give school districts one-time monies. So I believe this is like the 4th year that we have received these monies. And the very first year that we got the discretionary money, the recommendation was to spend it on Common Core related expenses because districts did not receive enough money to implement Common Core. So since then, we have identified we have textbook needs, so that's first priority, that we should reserve funds to pay for new textbooks. Right. And so up until last year, we have just put the money aside, and we did spend the math textbook adoption out of that fund, and also the related trainings and other Common Core related expenses from that. Starting this year, so this year, we're going to receive 1.7 million. And starting this year, we're putting the money in our operating budget.
Right.
Right.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. That's all.
All right, if there's no more questions, can I get some motions?
What are we accepting? 4 different things.
So I move, I move that we adopt the 4 recommendations as set forth in this agenda item.
I will second that.
Moved by Mr. Dauber and seconded by Ms. Baton-Caswell. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Mack. Thank you. let's take a 5-minute break. You're on the timer, so listen for the timer.
I don't trust this timer anymore. The timekeeper, yeah.
Sorry, I just knew it was going to beep, and I figured I might as well just going to bust my chops for that, I know.
Oh, I'm just going to remember that.
Just, exactly. I know, poor Jennifer.
Filed that away.
Poor Jennifer will be over here sort of. It as an agenda item for this week, and it did not make it onto the agenda. So we do not have it tonight, no. I'm so sorry about that. So yes, you'll use these. I know, and I've got to drink the water so I know. All righty. Next up, we're going to talk about the lease on the Briones Occupational Center. Oh, Dr. Galton, you're here. Thank you.
I am. Well, at any rate, this is a discussion item, not an action item. And the situation is this. We are just finished with a 50-year lease on this OH Center at Briones. In the end, nobody anywhere even knew there was a lease or this or that or the other thing except us. And so what we want to do is to formalize our arrangement with not the County Office of Education, but Santa Clara County. This is not a County Office of Education facility. It is an area used for evaluation and treatment of children who qualify for the California Children's Services Medical Therapy Program. They provide therapy to children who have neuromuscular and orthopedic problems between the ages of 0 and 21. The rooms are used for a variety of needs, evaluation, treatment, clinic, and assessment by physicians. They evaluate the children in bathing, toileting. They have a treatment bathroom, restrooms for staff and clients. Over the course of, and I do apologize because somehow or other the map, the Exhibit A map, isn't in your packet, but it will be next time. But the fact remains, here's Exhibit A, this kind of rough sketch of the OH Center. Now, what you see there was the original OH Center in 1967. The space that they're using has contracted. This new lease does not take away any space from them. Rather, it simply represents the space that they were using last year and this year and presumably will be using in the future. We are recommending that we bring this, we don't want to renew this lease for another 50 years. We're recommending that we bring it under a traditional lease structure, and therefore we're recommending we lease it for a year. The old lease has had payments of $1 a year, which, by the way, haven't been collected. But the fact remains we want to have a more, how would I put it, a more substantial payment, and so we're proposing $1,000 a year. The process, we've had agreement with the staff at the medical therapy program since, I don't know, very early in the spring. However, the county Fleet and Facilities Department intervened in May to say that they wanted to process this, of course, and put it to legal counsel. And so we've been waiting since May. I have some hope that they will be ready to put it to the Board of Supervisors in October, and I wanted to present it to you because I want to have authority to execute the lease, and then I'll come back to you if they want to make any changes. But again, I need authority to execute the lease, and so that's why I'm doing this now. But it's a discussion item. It's not going to come back for action until such time as I have their final version. And that's it. That's all there is.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have no cards on this one, so colleagues, let's get our questions and comments out. Let's start with you, Ms. Baton-Caswell.
You know, I don't, well, my only clarification is we haven't had any growth in Briones in their need for more classrooms. Is that correct?
Correct.
How many empty classrooms do we have at Briones?
Well, we don't like to use the word
I'm sorry,
empty, because it brings us into
used for other purposes.
Yes, thank you. Kathy, do you know that number? It's
For
2 or 3, something like that. I'll throw that number out there.
Okay, it's
But it
more
is
than
something-
0.
Yes, it's more than 0.
Okay, so we don't have worry that we're going to run out of space at Briones.
Not in the immediate future.
Okay, I have no other questions.
Thank you, Ms. Baton-Caswell. Mr. Dauber.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
No questions, thank you very much.
Ms. DeBrienza.
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Arun.
No questions.
Mr. Eastless.
No questions.
I don't have any questions either. Is there anything else you want us to know?
No,
Okay.
no. Although, I should mention that this was reviewed by the property committee prior to coming here.
Great, thank you.
Is this something that could come back on consent?
The question, see, what's going to happen is I'm going to get correspondence from the county, I hope. And if I don't, then I'm going to be moving up the line to move this forward. I'm wondering if, I would say once their legal counsel has it there probably will be some changes. So therefore, I'd prefer it be an action item, but again, I'm not showing up here until I get my response from the county.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Don't go far.
Yes, you're up next.
Good, and well, I know we had the city school liaison meeting this morning too, and I think you confirmed earlier.
Last week.
Last week. God, what happened to the time flies when you're having fun. Right, and Mr. Golden had pointed that out last week, that the amount was halved. So anyway, let's turn this over to Dr. Golden.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, this has been updated. The city staff went to their Department of Public Works and got an updated, not price, but an updated estimate. Let's keep in mind that this is going to be put out to proposal, and so therefore we'll have an actual amount that will be the successful proposer. So, and it could be 200,000 or more or less. This is, the city has already approved this. They've approved it on the 12th of September, and we're now on our second reading, and this is the 26th, and we've made some changes. I made some changes that are in italics here in the memo, and then also we have a red-lined scope of work, or a black line scope of work, since this is in black and white, and the board can make other changes tonight if they choose.
Thank you. Colleagues, we have one card on this. I suggest we take this card now. Mr. Horowitz, are you still here? Yes. Yes. Do you want to speak to this topic?
Yeah. Aren't you going to discuss it first?
No, we'll take your card first and then we'll discuss it.
Sort of make the same point I made earlier. That gives me a few more minutes. I want to say some things about open forum that I would stay for. But yeah, as I said, you're gonna. I don't care if it's $2 or $5 or it's $200,000. What fund it comes from? It comes from the public fund. It's a waste of money to hire a consultant for this job. You could do it yourself. Just have the 5 of you and the 7 or 9 city council people and sit around a room and figure out what you're going to do at Cubberley. What's the consultant going to do? You've already had committees that looked into this thing. So save your money. Use it wisely. You don't have $200,000 to just spend it, on a consultant. We got consultants all the time. So hopefully you'll vote this down, and then hopefully I'll go back to the city. I would have gone to the city council meeting to talk about this, but it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I couldn't stay up that late. But that's what happens at city council meetings, for those of you that go. The other thing that I want to say, because I have a few more minutes, is, I'm really embarrassed for Palo Alto Unified School District that Dr. McKee is leaving.
Mr. Horowitz, that's not actually the agenda item. I'm sorry.
But, but I have my minutes, so I can still speak.
You have to speak to the agenda item. I'm sorry, Mr. Horowitz.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, since I have another minute and 48 seconds, then I can
Coverly
say.
RFP is all yours.
Yeah. Then I can say that, save the district's money. Don't hire a consultant. As I said earlier, education's going to change. Never going to use Cubberley for a high school again. You're never going to need a high school again. Mr. Bolton pointed out 2 weeks ago, it's like money in the bank. We're going to keep it in the bank. Well, if we're only getting like 0.0001% on our money, I mean, is it worth keeping? You know, that building is falling apart. You're going to have to spend money on it. Where are you going to get the money for it? You know, work with the city and sell what they want, and you keep what you want and work it out. And don't hire a consultant. Save $200,000. I mean, I'm tired of, you know, hearing about all these committees. We need a committee for that. We need a consultant for that. You people are elected as officials by the people. You make decisions. And then we vote on you for your decisions, you know, yeah, up or down. I'm really disappointed. Your decision that you basically drove Dr. McGee out of our city, our district. So I want to let you know that. And thank you, Dr. McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz. All right. Let's see, colleagues, let's start with Mr. Dauber.
I certainly appreciate Mr. Horowitz's point that ultimately it's up to the school board and the city council to make a decision about Cumberly, but I think that it is still worth pursuing an RFP to advance the planning process in a way that requires more community input and focused attention than the school board and the city council are likely to be able to provide. So I still see real value for the community in the process that the RFP contemplates. So I intend to support the proposal and the issuing of the RFP.
Thank you, Mr. Dauber. Mr. Collins.
I'm generally favorable for this and thank you, Dr. Golden, for the amendments from the last version, which I think reflected my comments from last time. I do have one thing I wanted to add that I would hope that we could actually put in, which is, you know, in reading through this, there are a number of check-ins with the City School Liaison Committee, but very few, if any, check-ins with the Board of Education. And as those of us, I've been to one City School Liaison Committee as a substitute member, actually, and a couple in the past before I was on the board. And while that's a very useful committee, it doesn't represent in the sense, either group in the sense of they don't have delegated authority. Usually the topics aren't discussed in any detail before the meeting, so the members can speak with authority on behalf of what their bodies think. It's more of an information sharing session. So while I think the spirit of presentations to the City School Liaison Committee is a good spirit, communicate to both bodies what's going on, get buy-in from both bodies, I'm not sure that vehicle is the vehicle that will accomplish that. And ultimately, what's required for this to be successful, as Mr. Horowitz mentioned a couple times, is actually a meeting of the minds between these two bodies, which actually never have a meeting of the bodies. So I'd like to propose two things. One is that we add the meetings, updates to the Board of Education at tasks 4, 8, and 11. Currently at task 4, there's a presentation to the City School Liaison Committee. I think that we could supplement that with a presentation at the Board of Education. Task 8, sorry, I should read out what these tasks are, especially for the audience members. Task 8, thank you. Do you have it right there? Thank you.
It's big enough to see, though.
Oh, now it's gone.
Of course, we jumped out of it.
I have it here. Task 8 is the draft master plan and schematics. Have, again, a presentation to the Board of Education so we can give feedback on it. And then finally, task 11, which I believe is the CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act review. And add a Board of Education presentation for that. At task 8 right now, there's a presentation to the city's Park and Recs Committee. And at task 11, there's a presentation to the City Council already scheduled. So I think it makes sense that since we don't have a thing like a Parks and Recs Committee, that in both those cases we add presentations to this group. And I would actually, so I'd specifically like to ask that we put those in. I believe that if we put additional work on ourselves, that I can't imagine that the city will have any objection to that, since there are already meetings scheduled with city bodies on 2 of those 3. And if they want to join us on task force, I'm sure they can. The other thing I'd like to say, and not put this in the thing, but really mention it for my colleagues' consideration, is I would really urge us to, for probably task 8, when we get to the draft, to invite our colleagues at the city council to meet alongside with us, to have a joint meeting. I don't know if this has been done in the past. I don't know if there are procedural issues. Melissa's raising her eyebrows. Maybe it has. But I do think having a meeting of the bodies is a very useful step to having a meeting of the minds. And so, and I think without that, it will be very hard for us ever to move forward on Carberley in the way I know we all would like to. So I think it's probably inappropriate to stick it in at this last minute and try to get the city to go back to the council and get them to agree to it. But I don't see any reason that we couldn't agree to it, reach out to the council and try to arrange such a thing when we get closer to the date. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Ms. DiBrienza?
Thank you. So Carberley is one of these last few huge parcels of land that we have in our community, and we have a big stake in it. I agree with our commenter that the face of education is changing, and yet I think there are many different ways that it's changing, and one of them, it seems that a lot of ideas that are coming up require small, different kinds of spaces. That we don't necessarily have right now, and it's a conversation that's come up in a lot of different ways. So I do think we have a lot of work to do here and a lot to figure out, and I do think the first step, I agree with Mr. Dauber, that the first step here really is to put out this RFP. We need a lot of community input. This space is used by many different stakeholders in many different ways, and I think the district has to continue to think about the ways that we would like to use it as far as different programs go. So I'm supportive of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Baton-Caswell.
Well, I appreciate our speaker's opinion on this. I do know from having been in some meetings with the city and the school board, city council and school board on this topic too, actually, that we were not very effective. It's a lot of people. And so I think having somebody who has expertise in this area, who can help us get to the next stage would be very helpful. I don't believe that either group has anybody who specifically has that expertise in this area. And so I think that we really do need some help. And so I encourage us to work together. To Mr. Collins' point, it is true that the City School Liaison Committee doesn't have any authority. However, having discussions regularly at these meetings allows communication at several levels to happen, which is really helpful. That being said, I agree. I think having some meetings here where it's presented to the school board just like it's presented to the city council makes complete sense. The task 10, there's a joint city council PAUSD Board of Education study session listed on here, which I think is a good thing if it's facilitated well. And I'm bringing that up because those 2 meetings that we had with the city council were not facilitated well, and I don't think we made any progress as a result of either of those meetings. So this is why I'd want someone with skills to think about what we're trying to accomplish and make sure that those meetings were used to accomplish that rather than every board member and every city council member and the city manager and the superintendent all speaking their opinion in a meeting and nothing happening. So that would be my recommendation. I think I would support all the places, Mr. Collins, that you said to put in a presentation to the Board of Education. I think that makes complete sense. Dr. Golden, I appreciate that the comments I had last time that you took them to heart in the narrative here. So thank you very much. I guess one of my questions is who in the school district that's not on the board will be the group on this from your perspective?
Well, the suggestion would be that it's Ms. Mack and myself, and also Ron Smith, who works in our construction program.
Okay, so I think it would be helpful to designate yourself somewhere so that the community knows that as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did we start with you? We did. Mr. Islas?
Yeah, so I don't think we should just jump to selling this or whatever we would do with this property, because as I was thinking back, I used to go to a program called Dream Catchers. I don't know if you're aware with it. And they would, from what I know of, is they're at Gunn. They're at a school. Man, I forgot.
Fair Meadow.
Is it Fair Meadow now?
Their office is.
Yeah. Now at Pally, and you know, what if we just had so many more? We could have so many more programs that help students from the Tinsley program, even from Palo Alto. And what if we could station programs like that there instead of just selling and saying it's a waste of space and a waste of time? That's my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roon?
Yeah, so I agree with the speaker, Mr. Horowitz, for saying that education is changing, and you're totally right. Education is changing, and the way we talk about it is changing. But I do think that we shouldn't actually let go of this Coverly space. I think because education is changing, we have all the more reason to turn it into a space where we can do a whole lot of other things. And seeing as we own 27 acres of the 35-acre site, I think we do have a responsibility to use it responsibly and use it wisely. I do agree with Mr. Collins on the proposal that we should actually have presentations to ourselves as well as the City Council, and have a joint meeting with City Council, because ultimately, I mean, we own most of the site, and I think it's our duty to interface with them, get good communication, and ultimately find a solution that works for everyone. Dr. McGee, I know last year you did a bunch of surveying in regards to alternate uses for Coverly. I think it's a pretty good time to bring that stuff back out again, because I feel like if we're having all these discussions about Coverly, especially with the RFP and all that, I think it would be really valuable to have the community input that we've already got from last year. And I think in general, I can think of a lot of ways that I think Coverly could be used. There's a lot of special stuff. I totally agree with Richie on some of the stuff he said, but I mean, that's not exactly for today. Today's for the RFP. And I don't really have an opinion on RFP versus not RFP, but I do think because we own 27 acres and because it is such an important piece of the land we have remaining to PAUSD, I think we do need to devote special attention to it, just because of all the things we could do with it. And yeah, thanks, Mr. Golden, for the presentation. This has been really helpful. Yeah, that's all I need to say.
Thank you.
Thanks. I don't have any other questions. Are there other questions, or would someone like to make a motion?
Do we want to add in the meetings, the presentations to the Board of Education in here?
I think that's a good idea.
I thought so.
So why don't you make the motion, Mr. Collins, because you have, I'm sorry, I
Okay.
don't want to, it just, you have the list of them, and
I have it down too.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you. So would you prefer that I move to amend it and then we move to adopt it, or both the same?
I think you can just move to adopt it with those changes, yeah.
That's what I would think, okay. So I move that we authorize what am I authorizing, Dr. Golden? I'm reading the item here.
Regular updates,
I took
presentations to the
notes.
board of task 4, 8, and 11 is what I had.
Yeah, I took notes, and so
Yeah.
what...
Well, no, in terms of the notes I have, but we don't have to authorize you to do something? Are we authorizing?
Well,
you to do
you'd
something?
authorize me or you'd authorize an amendment to the RFP as
Yeah.
follows, and I'll work with Vicki on this as well, that in task 4, the meetings to include add a presentation to the PAUSD Board of Education. That's task 4.
but he also needs to direct,
Yeah, we need to direct you to do something?
direct you to allow the City of Palo Alto to issue this RFP, right?
Oh, yes,
Yeah, that
you
was my
do need to
question, sorry.
do this.
Yeah, I
You do
can-
need to take this recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I move that we direct staff to move forward with the RFP and amending the RFP language to add a stakeholder workshop with the Board of Education for Task 4 a meeting, review meeting with the Board of Education at Task 8, and a review meeting with the Board of Education at Task 11. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Collins and seconded by Mr. Dauber. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed, say nay. All righty, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your help, Dr. Olin. Appreciate that.
All right, we're moving to 6G. Ms. Hendricks, you're up.
Thank you. So the financial terms of Ms. Conway's employment contract were read aloud at the board meeting on September 12th. And now pursuant to Government Code 54953 and in accordance with the Brown Act, I'm asking for approval of Ms. Conway's employment contract.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, we have one card. Rebecca Eisenberg.
Hey again. Okay, apart from whether or not the Brown Act violations can be cured with this retroactive approval, and apart from any reservations I may have regarding the progress and potential of this particular administrator, I urge the board to reject Ms. Conway's 3-year contract for the following reasons. 1, most other leadership roles, such as principals, are hired for 1-year terms. The same term length should apply to assistant superintendents. Most employees in the United States actually are at will, meaning they can be terminated without cause at any time. So promising a 1-year term is already different from the norm. 2, this limitation to 1-year terms is a 1-year term is particularly important given the imminent changing of the guard. For example, this contract provides that the superintendent will be responsible for all of Ms. Conway's supervision and evaluation. It is much easier, it will be much easier for you to recruit your best potential new superintendent if you allow the new superintendent to make the most essential strategic hires, such as this role, and to manage them themselves. 3, the Cousin report provided clear confirmation that hiring and managing employees is not the greatest strength of our current superintendent. Therefore, extra consideration should be given to his choices of administrators. 4, the financial commitment of a 3-year contract of this particular one is enormous. It amounts to approximately $300,000 a year when you include the grossed up cost of an employment agreement, which includes benefits, in addition to car stipends, cell phone stipends, and other perks, coming to approximately $1 million commitment, which I think you can avoid. 5, although the contract may provide for early termination for cause, this board does not have a good record on actually using those provisions of termination for cause. And 6, even, and importantly, the contract, which might be just a incompetent drafting maneuver done by your outside counsel, actually puts all the ability, all the power to actually terminate for cause in the hands of the superintendent and not in the hands of the board. Maybe that was an error in drafting. Finally, it should be said that even if the school board were to attempt to terminate for cause, it's almost always, such a termination almost always leads to proposed litigation and expensive settlement agreements. Therefore, I'm just proposing one simple solution, which is to amend this employment contract and have it be for a 1-year term rather than for 3. I think this is very fair. If Ms. Conway does an excellent job in her job, the district would be thrilled to continue her employment. And I think we all hope that that's the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eisenberg. All right, colleagues. Todd, let's start with you. Do you have any questions or comments?
So informal.
Sorry, I got
Yeah,
informal on you.
No, I don't have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Ms. DiBrienza.
I don't have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Ms. Baton-Caswell.
No, I don't have any.
Mr. Dauber.
No.
Mr. Eastles?
No.
Mr. Arun?
No questions or comments.
Ms. Hendricks, is a 3-year contract a normal recruiting practice for administrators at this level?
It's been the norm in this school district. I think it varies district by district.
I'd be interested to know when we go out to do more hiring, kind of what the other benchmark districts do.
Absolutely. Glad to get that for you.
We have this, it's signed, we have her in the house, so I don't propose making any changes to this particular contract, but I would be interested to know what the options are in the future.
What an industry standard would be on that. Sure.
All righty, thank you. Would someone like?
Can I add just one other comment?
Yes.
Building on Ms. Godfrey's comment, which I very much agree with, I also wanted to agree with our speaker. I do think looking at the drafting of the contract would be beneficial. I've read a number of the contracts, which are from the same form, and it is not in my experience. I'm sure it could stand, like most contracts, some additional revision and tighter drafting, and which would benefit both the employees and the district. So I hope we can do that as we move forward.
We will, thank you.
Yeah, those were drafted by our former law firm, so with our new firm, I think it'd be a good idea to have them review it.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions, comments, or maybe a motion?
I move that we improve the employment contract of Yolanda Conaway.
I second that.
Moved by Mr. Dauber and seconded by Ms. Baden Caswell. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
I abstain.
One abstention? Mr. Roon? Okay. All righty, thank you. Let's move on to H, approval of superintendent's contractual compensation from prior years.
Thank you. So this was brought forward on September 12th as well. The board is being asked to retroactively approve contractual compensation based on satisfactory evaluations for our superintendent for the 2014, 15, and 15, 16 school years.
All right, let's take our one card, Ms. Eisenberg.
Maybe my last comment for a long time, and I think you already know what I'm going to say. Well, first of all, without having access to the separation agreement that maybe you already signed and maybe you didn't, the Palo Alto Online website actually refers to a signed separation agreement. I assume that maybe these considerations will be or already have been made while negotiating any separation. I just want to again state for the record that at the time that these compensation increases were approved by the board was not privy to the information that it now has. It's a little bit believable that during those 2 years, the board was not aware of the numerous legal violations, errors, missteps, bad decisions, and other unlawful and irresponsible actions that took place during those years, and that maybe they had an argument that was reasonable in approving these raises and giving, these compensation increases. But right now, given what you know through both the Cozen report and through the Office of Civil Rights detailed letter of findings, in addition to what you know from other resources, the Palo Alto Online, Merck, KTVU, you now have access to so much more information about what actually went on during these school years. And it's my firm belief that in order for you to be true to your fiduciary duty, you need to reject these raises. Raises should be given to employees who actually do successful jobs. We need to be firm about tying compensation to performance. That I have to imagine an HR executive would agree with. And giving a raise for the performance during these years, I think would be inappropriate and possibly unlawful. I urged you to deny them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eisenberg. All right, let's see if we have any questions or comments about this item. Ms. DeBranza.
Just a quick comment. As I'm sure you all know, Mr. Collins and I were not on the board when all of these compensation increases happened, but we have, I'll say I have, read the satisfactory evaluations, so I feel comfortable approving the increases. I don't know if the board feels strongly about us not voting because we weren't part of the board then, or
We
because
checked
we
with
read this.
council and you can vote.
Okay. I have nothing else.
Thank you. Ms. Baten-Caswell.
I don't have anything to add.
Mr. Dauber?
Yeah, I don't have any comments. The board failed to take the appropriate action at the time, although the satisfactory, we understood at the time that the satisfactory evaluations had the contractual consequence of adjusting the superintendent's compensation. So what we're doing here is simply cleaning up after our failure to observe the correct forms, which are significant, but that's really the action that we're taking.
Thank you, Mr. Dauber. Mr. Collins?
I'm planning to abstain on this.
All righty. Mr. Arun, any questions? Mr. Eastless, any questions?
No.
All right, I don't have any questions either. Can I get a motion?
I move that we approve the 2015 and 2016 contractual compensations based on the satisfactory evaluations for 2014 and 2014 and 2015 and 2015-16.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Dauber and seconded by Ms. Baton Caswell. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Anybody opposed, say nay.
I abstain.
Any abstentions? Okay, abstentions, Mr. Arun and Mr. Collins. All right. Next, let's talk about textbooks.
Right. This is, I don't know, Ms. Mack, if you're going to take this, but this is the annual certification that we do have all the available materials. We had the public hearing earlier this evening as required by statute, and being no comment, no complaints, we're seeking approval. But did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Okay.
All right, this is a discussion item. Colleagues, let's get our questions asked. Let's start with you, Ms. Baton Caswell.
I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dauber. No questions. Mr. Collins. Nothing. Ms. DiBrienza.
No questions.
Mr. Eastless.
What are we talking about?
Item number.
We are in item number I, which is certification of availability of textbooks and instructional materials.
This is an annual piece.
You could ask perhaps, like, what is this item for and why do we do it every year?
Yeah, I'll ask that.
Yes, good question.
What's it for and why do we do it every year?
Because it's required by Ed Code.
All right, no questions.
All righty. Mr. Arun, any questions?
Yeah, no questions.
You know, I just, since whoever's watching this might not be reading what we have here, it's important that we confirm that we have a textbook for every student or sufficient instruction materials, or both of those. We have talked in the past about whether students should have two, one for home and one for school, but the requirement is that they get one, and that's what we're talking about tonight.
So, Ms. Mack, is this something you can bring back on consent? Or do you need to have us vote in as an action item next meeting?
Consent is fine.
Do we want to just waive and dispense it?
We can waive the two-meeting rule, right?
I move that we waive the two-meeting rule.
I'll second that.
Moved by Mr. Collins and seconded by Ms. Baton Caswell. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? All right, now can I get another motion then?
I move that we certify the availability of textbooks and instructional materials.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Collins and seconded by Ms. DiBrienza. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. All right, item J.
Great. In accordance with Board Bylaw 9322, a community member formally requested that this letter from the Office for Civil Rights, this letter of findings dated March 8, 2017, be placed on a regular agenda. The agenda setting concurred and has been placed on tonight's agenda for public comment and for information. Historically, the Office for Civil Rights contacted us on December 2nd, 2016, as a follow-up to the cases, the Pally and gun cases dating back to 13-14. We met with the Office for Civil Rights on December 7th, and at that time they outlined concerns they had, potential findings they had. We asked for something in writing, and they indicated that their usual practice was to provide the letter of findings after a resolution agreement was entered into. So between December 7th and the board approval of the resolution agreement, which is in the packet, we discussed with OCR what should be included in that resolution agreement, what the reporting requirements are, the duration of the agreement, and ended up with a final signed agreement. The letter of findings was issued shortly thereafter. I referred to it in a board meeting that we had received it, sent it to the press at that time. I went back through the email and actually found the emails saying to the press and the board. So this As you can see, if you compare the letter of findings to the resolution agreement, it parallels it. So this doesn't require any action on the board's part. Again, this was just for information at the request of a community member.
All right, colleagues, I have 3 cards. Why don't we take these 3 cards and then we'll do our questions and comments, if we have any. So Vicky Huang, Catherine Jordan, Danny Epstein.
Hi, it's me again, but I promise not be heavy this time. Okay, I just want to say that since we know what our mistakes are and we are working very hard to correct the mistakes, since we have the responsibility to educate all the students in PAUSD about the Title IX, so I think we can take the middle school sex education curriculum and maybe modify or adding on it to teach students about what would be considered sexual harassment actions, both verbally and action, and also what to do when you think you are harassed, what is the procedure, and what is UCP or all the terms, so that students will know. And so that's one point. The second point is that the current middle school sex education material curriculum that we adopted is pretty good at instruct the students about different orientations, or people have different, sexual orientation, and be respectful for that. However, in some of the case studies, the scenarios that described in between, it's actually a little bit borderline to be considered sexual harassment. So I would encourage the district maybe assign someone to take a look at the details, especially those case studies, in order to avoid any future mistakes or any future things that we don't want them to happen. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Catherine Jordan? Wait, you don't look like Catherine Jordan.
Yeah, obviously I'm not Kathy Jordan, but I have her script.
Okay.
She just left.
Okay, I'm
So
going
she
to
asked
change your
me.
name on here.
Okay, she asked me to read her script for her.
Okay, make sure you introduce yourself so we have your name on tape.
Also my name or Kathy's name?
No, your name.
Okay, my name is Amanda Chi.
Thank
And I'm reading the script for and on behalf of Kathy Jordan.
Okay.
I was saying in my own view to the board after the meeting.
All right.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to see the OCR letter of findings on the agenda tonight. Thank you. I hope that reviewing this letter of findings, coupled with the cousin draft report, will give the board some perspective on the endemic and the system problems of non-compliance with anti-discrimination laws within PAUSD, and some shame and some impetus to do something about it. It should also give some perspective about the actions of some of the players then and the actions of the same players now. Kim Del Rio was called out in the OCR letter of findings for her failure to report 25 sexual misconduct allegations against Phil Winston, some which came from students over the course of 3 years. What about the ongoing harm to students that occurred due to her failure to come forward? We have very severe cultural problems existing not only within the district, but also potentially the school board as well. As there has been a depth of denial existing, seemingly intended to distract and divert us from the tawdry reality in front of us. Palo Alto seems to pride itself on its diversity and tolerance, its entrepreneurial spirit and work ethic. Yet here, in a school district, we tolerate discrimination on the basis of sex, among other things, seemingly on a daily basis. And that here, we have had numerous reports, this OCR letter of findings, the cousin draft report, the August 27 OCR report, which I assume says the same thing, and which has revealed an unwillingness to do what is called for, not calorical errors or training issues, as it's been bandied about, but instead, what can I call it but a form of corruption revealed by the cousin report. And what we have seen is a refusal to obey the school laws of the state and this country. This is not a one-time event. As this OCR later of findings show us, this has been happening for years here at PAUSD, for shame. And now we know about these 2 recent sexual assault incidents at a party. What we ignore, we permit. And what we permit, we condone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chi. Danny Epstein?
Hi. The letter of findings documenting activity from 2010, along with the cousin report, along with the 2015 incident and others still under investigation, show a deep-rooted, long-time culture at Pali, under the leadership of Ms. Durio, of dishonesty, hiding information, and silencing of student voice and reporting of sexual assault. No new policy or training will change this. They knew what they were supposed to do, and they chose not to do it consistently over many years. Every time we're told that the problem will be fixed, but nothing changes. In the meantime, the kids are the victims. The administration has been given enough chances. Stop this now.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, let's start with you, Mr. Dauber. Do you have any questions or comments?
I think the resolution, the letter of finding and bears rereading because it makes it clear the consequences for students of failure to follow the board policies and regulations, and then the underlying state and federal laws. And I think it's really important. We tend to get wrapped up in those policies and procedures to remember the reason for them is to protect student safety, and that when we fail to do that, we fail to protect student safety, and that is the underlying issue. I am very pleased with how the board and district staff handled the negotiation of the resolution agreement. I think it demonstrated a changed commitment to cooperation with the Office for Civil Rights, and I hope and expect that we're going to continue that spirit of cooperation. I do have one question to follow up on a question that I asked last time, which is on the Title IX investigation regarding Mr. Farrell at Pali. I don't know, Dr. McGee, if you've had a chance to look into that yet, but I fear that Title IX investigation is way overdue, and I'd like to know the status
Yeah,
of it.
it's in the process. I think that's Ms. Bueller's investigation. We have an update, Comey and I and Eve, I don't know if Eve's on the call or not. Lauren is from Cozen's office, is on the call with Thursday morning at 9:30.
Okay.
And so we'll get that information for you at that time.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dauber. Mr. Collins?
I'm glad that this item was put on. I do think it is something that bears revisiting and reminding ourselves of the issues that we faced over several years in bringing ourselves into compliance with important federal law governing the safety of our students. And I want to thank Dr. McGee, who I think led the effort to bring our district into to a resolution of this very long-standing set of disputes with the and disagreements with the Office of Civil Rights, and I think brought it to a fruitful conclusion with a resolution agreement that led to this letter of findings. So I thank Dr. McGee for providing that to one of the many things he provided to the district in his time here. So again, I hope people take the opportunity to, if they see this in the board packet, to reread it, because when I reread it, it was bracing. It is striking to see the things, to understand the things that we have done and the things that we need to do in order to be effective in our jobs and to protect the safety of our students and provide the kind of educational environment that I know virtually every employee and parent in our community want to provide to our students. So I appreciate that the OCR provided this detailed letter of findings. I think we do well to study it and remember it. And again, I thank Dr. McGee for creating the resolution agreement that led to this letter of finding. So thank you.
Mr. Collins. Ms. DiBrienza.
I also appreciate being in there and for a chance to really sit with it again. We spent a lot of time with it in March and in the spring. Thank you for working really closely with OCR and getting to this point. As I reread it, I was pleased to see the progress that we've made. Some changes in policies, some changes in practices. And one of the things that struck me, sort of reminded me of our meeting last Thursday, number A7 talks about, to the extent not addressed by the above provisions, the district will develop and implement policies, procedures, and practices in compliance. And I think that gets to one of the things we all were talking about last Thursday, that, okay, we've done these board policies, we're having these trainings, there's still something sort of missing. And so really paying attention to the policies, procedures, and practices that are going to get us to where we need to be to really protect students and provide students what we're obligated to provide them. Yeah, I think this is something we need to keep revisiting and make sure that we meet the requirements of everything in here and beyond. You know, that just because all of the pieces are there doesn't mean it all comes together necessarily. There might be more things I think we've already seen. There's more culture stuff that we need to keep working on. So I look forward to doing that work this year.
Thank you. Ms. Peyton-Caswell.
Yeah, as I reread this, and thinking back on our meeting on Thursday, listening to the COSIN report, it seems to me that we have a huge opportunity to help people understand what the resolution agreement actually means. So if you just read the resolution agreement, it's a lot of rules. But if you tie it back to examples where we made decisions that we shouldn't have made, I think it would be really a helpful way to do scenario training, to actually bring each of the things in the resolution agreement and in the COSIN report into a training to talk about, the letter of findings and the COSIN report, and use that as a way to help our staff understand what each of these agreements we made actually means when we don't do it. I think it's very hard when things are very dry, when you just have a lot of text, it's very hard to understand how it has anything to do with your day-to-day. So it's a huge opportunity, and I hope we will take advantage of this opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Arun.
Yeah, so thanks for putting this letter in the board packet. I know with the resolution agreement in this letter, I'm really happy that we do have the resolution agreement now, because now we can work on protecting students and making sure they know what their rights are in terms of UCP and all of the rest. Ultimately, yeah, we didn't do a lot of stuff, and now hopefully we can remedy all of that. Ultimately, like, this isn't closure, and this shouldn't be treated as closure, I feel like, because there's still a whole lot of work we need to do in terms of the procedures, in terms of staff training, student knowledge. And I think, I know one of the speakers at Open Forum, I think she suggested, or speakers speaking for this agenda item, suggested combining Title IX education with sex ed, living skills, all of that. I want to learn more about the merits of that idea, because I feel like if we can make educating students, if we can educate students on this Title IX procedures and all that more efficiently, I feel like that'll be a big step forward in terms of making it easier for everyone in the district to know how these procedures work, what the resolution agreement is, and especially with scenario training, using this resolution agreement and using the examples in the past. I feel like that would also really help. I think also, on that note, scenario training for students as well would be appropriate, I feel like, especially when it comes to especially when they need to know what their rights are. So yeah, that's all I need to say. Thanks for putting this in the board packet. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Islas.
I think you just covered everything I wanted to say, but I also wanted to say thank you, board, for prioritizing student safety, may it be suicide prevention or preventing or showing students what sexual assault is. And that really means a lot from each and every one of your board members, and it shows how much you guys actually put in for this district. I want to thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Islas. I would piggyback off my colleagues, all of my colleagues' comments, and say I I envision that we have going forward. I don't know if it's a team, if it's an ongoing thing, or if it's a task force, but as we look at trying to figure out how to get the culture of care and compliance second nature to us, student education around what it looks like, what to do, what not to do, where to go if you have trouble is important. I think parent education is also important. I think we have a role to play there. I looked at the UCP log recently, and there's some cases that are from off-site. And so I think parents need to know how to help their kids when they're on-site or when things happen off-site and what to do about that. So I can see where we have professional development, parent education, student education, kind of across those vectors, so that we're all kind of on the same page. Understand that not only is it important to get this right, but that we know how to do it. So I think,
Can I make
unless
a
anybody else has anything, we'll have.
Yeah, if I could,
Yes,
just
absolutely.
a few moments.
Yes.
So we're putting this on our next secondary principles agenda, and what I've written up for that meeting for Ms. Ofek and Ms. Conaway and others, and the principles are some ideas that I've gleaned from conversations with teachers, but especially with students at the outdoor office hours at Gunn and our hour and then some session at ASB. And they talked a lot about simulations and scenarios, not only based on the Cozen report, but on real life examples. And I shared a couple ideas I'd used in other situations where people could do this anonymously behind a backlit curtain and tell their story. And there was a lot of enthusiasm around that and how people would respond, what happens when I report at both schools. There's great concern for if I report, what will happen to me? Will this be a big deal? What will happen to the other person? We need to address that. That has to be part of the training. And you know, I shared with the students, it's if you don't report, it's not just you you're impacting. It gets into that whole broken window. If you don't fix it, it's going to get worse for other people, and then suddenly you do have an epidemic. We talked about different places to deliver it. Living skills early on was one. Freshman and sophomore advisory. I got an earful about freshman and sophomore advisory at Pally. Richie could elaborate. About the importance of Camp Unity. Several students stopped me afterwards and since then to say this would be a powerful place to deliver this training for students. And I even approached me about making a board presentation on that. They thought training the teachers was equally as important, and they recognize that some teachers are much more effective than others in delivering this training to students. And I have a long, literally 5 pages of notes on this. So again, I think the more we listen to students, you know, well, it's almost like the D school, right? You work on interviews and then develop your plan. So we'll deliver this to the secondary school principals, and I thought Ms. Godfrey's idea of putting a team approach together that resonated with me, I'm sure will resonate with them, and we will develop a plan. And I think this ought to come back to the board too, because this. I think as we learned at last Thursday, there's training with a small t and training with a big T. And as I shared with, I think one of the reporters, the difference between a generic PowerPoint slideshow and immersive simulations and scenarios leads to quite different outcomes.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. All right, team, we're at board operations. I know that you probably don't recognize it.
What's that?
I know.
Wait, what's the time? Is that 11?
Yes.
It's 11:25 somewhere.
Do I need to move to shorten the meeting?
Don't harass me. Don't harass me.
That's fine.
Okay, so board operations, why don't we start with Mr. Collins?
I have no report.
I don't have a report.
I actually have a couple things. We had a city school liaison committee meeting last week. Mr. Dauber and I attended, and one of the reports was on changes to the VTA bus schedule across the city, and that actually impacts particularly Gunn significantly and Terman. and some ideas around changing the free Palo Alto shuttle to fill in some of the gaps. These things are still under discussion, but I encouraged a conversation with our principals so that they're aware of what some of these suggestions were. And I think it's really important that we understand what's going to change. Otherwise, I think we're going to have some challenges. Yesterday, Ms. Godfrey and I went to the Community Partnership Awards that Stanford puts on once a year. And there was this really nice presentation and award for a collaborative partnership between Stanford University faculty and students in the Palo Alto Unified School District and Lucille Packard Children's Hospital around providing science labs in the hospital for students in our hospital school. And it's called LabCL, Laboratory Activities for Broadened Scientific Inquiry. I'll actually let Ms. Godfrey say a couple more words about this, because apparently not only did they get an award, but they're going to be part of a presentation at CSBA.
The presentation's on a different topic, but.
Oh, it is? Oh, I thought
it's
it
a
was the
different
same
topic,
thing.
yeah.
Oh, okay, this was very inspiring, and if we can get maybe a little write-up from them beyond this partnership, I think you guys would be interested.
Yeah, they found that it was really hard to do labs for the kids in the hospital school because it's a hospital setting, so you can't just take a bunch of acid and things and make labs. And so they engaged some student volunteers, and they create labs that are appropriate to be done in a hospital school. The woman who spoke yesterday is a fifth-year PhD student in chemical engineering. And I sat next to her at lunch, and she said, I've read this little speech 10 times, and I have cried every 10 times, and so I'm just going to cry. It's just the way it is. I love these children. And so they design these experiments, and she said, particularly the thing that lights kids up is if it's an experiment about the condition they have, because they're learning about it hands-on. And so Thursday is Science Day, so it's, well-loved.
Wait, and just one more thing, they're posting these lab kit experiments and sharing them with other hospital schools. So I thought that was pretty neat.
That's awesome.
I was reflecting on our meeting, was it Thursday, to discuss the Cozen O'Connor report? On Thursday, and it seemed to me that a minute for a public comment was too short, and that the difference between, it seemed to me anyways, and I have heard from some community members about this, the difference between a minute and a half, which I think was what we had landed on so for some previous comment period, and a minute was quite significant. And so I think we should revisit the lower limit on time for public comment. I think, it felt to me like we had the balance wrong in that case. So I'm suggesting that at some future board meeting that we rediscuss that question.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I remember we had tried a minute and a half before, and that seemed okay, but the minute did seem to fly by. The other thing about the hospital school that I'll share is what Ms. Baton-Caswell alluded to there. They have a presentation spot at CSBA because there aren't a lot of rules about hospital schools and how you get students in and out and how money flows and all those sorts of things. So they are part of a consortium with like a dozen other hospital schools in the state, and they spend a lot of time talking about this stuff, and they are kind of just moving the whole movement forward by just taking a CSBA section and doing some brainstorming around how you do this better. As a basic aid district, it's less of an issue for us than it is for other revenue limit districts. But I'm proud of our hospital school for taking the lead on trying to figure it out for others. It's even things as easy as just getting curriculum from teachers for their kids. So they do great work, and they have a prom every year. If you get the prom invite, go to the prom. It's usually in May. It's awesome.
Probably get an invitation to Thursday as well, to Thursday Science Day.
Yes, if you want to go Thursday Science Day, I bet you can get yourself invited as well. Let's see. We have just scheduled, I know we've spent a lot of time together recently, but we've just scheduled a special session for tomorrow, which I believe just got posted. 9 p.m. tomorrow, closed session. We're going to address topic number 2 on the closed session agenda, which is employee appointment, interim superintendent. As we committed, we're going to get the interim leadership model worked out as soon as possible, so that work starts tomorrow at 9 p.m. That's it for me. Dr. McGee, do you have any closing words for us?
Just a moment. After 30 years as superintendent, I'm not going to miss the frenetic pace. I'm looking forward to some other opportunities. I'm really looking forward not to having to FaceTime my wife every night and seeing her in person. We FaceTime every night and have not missed a weekend together since I've been here, so it will be nice to spend more time with them and be more than a weekend grandpa. But I will miss much, and this incredible, talented teaching and support staff are second to none. The leadership team, I've worked with a lot of leadership teams, and I have never met one with more dedication, but really bar none. I went to Escondido today. I wanted to stop into kindergarten. My granddaughter lost her first tooth yesterday, so I had to go to kindergarten and get a fix and see real kids with real missing teeth. And Chuck Merritt's out visiting classrooms. Tom, I'm sitting next to Tom Jacobowski last night at the math workshop. I took pictures of him embroiled in this. Our 2 new middle school principals joined Lisa Hickey, and I can't imagine better middle school leaders. And these high schools are something special. And I just walked over to the MAC today, talked to kids along the way, stopped in to see Miss Philpot's class. It's just, it is a gift. And we're going to have some problems here, but I have no doubt that the staff, this board, this community can solve them, can sustain and strengthen AAR, full day kindergarten, the middle school math, and it has been such an honor and pleasure to serve, and I'm really glad I chose this for my last superintendency. And I mean that, and I'm glad they had the opportunity to work with this board and write recommendations for you too, and the AAR students I serve. So I wish you all the very best, Ms. Morales. I so appreciated our time working together with your family, and we'll make sure that Ignacio is that we're looking after him, and that goes to you and all the other parents who care so deeply about their kids. And our community, our state, and our country, and well beyond are going to be all better because of what we are doing here and what you will continue to do. So thank you from the bottom of my heart and the depths of my soul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Over and out.
Over and out.
There's no operations, acknowledgements, recognitions, and board calendar?
Yeah, we'll
We
have
used to do
some,
them all
Go
by
ahead.
expectation. We used to do them all at the same time, sorry.
Wait, yeah.
Sorry.
Do you want to
Did you have something else?
agenda
I do.
tomorrow or not?
Yeah, I do.
We
Do you
have
want to
that wasn't
reconvene?
agenda.
Wait,
We can
wait,
reconvene.
wait.
What?
Ms. DiBrienza, please share.
I
I'm
just
sorry.
wanted to say, I think that last Thursday when we had our special meeting, it was difficult for people who celebrate the Jewish holidays. And I know that we were very thoughtful of that as much as we could, given our time constraints. But I think it would really serve us well to look at the rest of the year and look at next year's calendar, even when we're in school, and just make sure we really try to avoid that in all of our major religions, and just be as mindful of that as we can going forward.
Thank you, Mr. DiBrienza. Sorry to have cut you off.
That's okay. Thanks.
We're adjourned again.
That's on my calendar.
Oh, it's in my computer as well, I think,
Is it?
yes.